This meeting is called to order. This is the meeting of Economic Development and Employment Committee of Brooklyn Community Board 2. This is being recorded for public access and archiving in attendance with the new New York State Open Meetings Law. Okay, my name is Bill Flinoy. I'm the chair of this meeting. All attendees, please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking. To maintain appropriate discussion and voting process, I will make it known when and which topics are open for comment by committee members, board members at large, and the general public. If you have a question that falls outside of public comment time, please type your questions in the chat panel and we will address them as time permits. You may also email the district office at any time outside of these meetings. We continue to provide access to all of our neighbors, regardless of physical ability or limitations. If you require accommodation or assistance for full participation, please contact the district office 72 hours before any public meeting. The committee secretary will now conduct a roll call.
Hey all, we'll start with Chair Bill Flinoy.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Denise Peterson. Hey Denise. Catherine Gilman, that's me. Kate Yearwood Young.
Hey Kate.
Hey Kate. Ciro Scala.
Here.
Hey Ciro, I see you.
Hey.
Maisha Morales.
Here.
Hey Maisha. Latrell Masso.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks Latrell. And Celeste. Staten.
Hi, I'm here.
Hey Celeste, okay, we're set.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I could have adoption of the agenda, please.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Okay, tonight we're going to have three presentations. One presentation is going to be the Atlantic Avenue Business Improvement District. The second one is going to be the DUMBO Business Improvement District. And the final one will be the Ridgewood Savings Bank. What I will now do is I will allow the general public to make any comments about these items on the agenda prior to the actual discussion by the committee and presentation. All those who wish to comment, please raise your hands. Okay, I hear you have 2 minutes to comment. Okay, I can't hear you.
Point of order that this comment period is actually to comment on the structure and the items included in the agenda. If you're here, if you'd like to actually comment on one of the agenda items, we recommend you wait until after that presentation is given.
Thank you, Tara.
Mr. Alex Guillot, do you have a comment on the actual agenda or do you have a comment on an agenda item?
I have a comment on the open street, which I don't know if this is this particular topic right now.
Chair Flournoy, I recommend that we hold on that comment until after the presentation.
Okay, fair enough. I will do that. Thank you, Terry, for your advice. Okay, with that, the first item on the agenda is the Atlantic Avenue Business Improvement District. Okay, Kelly Carroll, okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Community Board 2 and all the neighbors that came out tonight. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me one moment. And don't judge all my tabs. Okay, is everyone able to see that? Can I get some heads up or nods? Thank you. Okay, so good evening. My name is Kelly Carroll. I'm the Executive Director of the Atlantic Avenue BID. And this year, I'm very excited to say that we are going to have an open street again, and we will have some public programming aspects of it. So this is pretty straightforward. I'll go through the boxes. So the first box here is, what are we doing? We're doing an open street. Again, it's going to be on Hoyt Street, which is a very short block. Everyone knows in the neighborhood between State and Atlantic. It's going to be every weekend from April 1st, which is a Saturday, to October 29th, which is the last Sunday in October. This is a curtailment of both hours and days. Last year, we were also open on Friday nights. that is going away this season. So it's only going to be a weekend, and the times it will be open will be from 12 p.m. until 11 p.m. That way we're not, ruining anyone's life deep into the evenings on the weekends. And many of those restaurants as well close well before the 11 p.m. On Sunday nights. This is also a change from last year, as we previously opened the open street, closed the open street to traffic starting at 10 a.m. So this is both a curtailment of one day and a curtailment of hours from last year. Moving into this box over on the left side, this is about 30 weekends. It's actually 31, but just to make the numbers sound nice, we're saying about 30 weekends, 15 of which will have some public programming aspect to it. So this is also a departure from last year. There was not any public programming on the Hoyt Street open street in the previous year because of staffing at the bid. This year, we're aiming for about 2 events per month, ideally every other weekend. So these public programming events are going to be things like a free yoga classes, art for the community, possibly I had spoken with the Hoyt about doing a lavender day where people can come pick up free lavender. Also, we're thinking about doing something for Earth Day. All of the events will be free and open to the public. And there will also, and I see your hand, Tanya. I'll just finish my presentation and then I'll get to questions. Thank you. And so it's not going to be heavily programmed. This is very much for us a pilot. So we're going to start with what we can do, about 15 weekends this year, and then see how it goes, get feedback, and make the necessary changes for next year. This box here in yellow about the site plan, which I'll go to on the next slide. The site changes are going to be the moving of the emergency lane, which I'll show diagrammatically on the next slide, which will make a lot more sense than me just talking about it right here. The last item on this slide is in terms of outreach. In addition to meeting with neighbors tonight with Community Board 2, I personally hand-delivered letters that were personalized to food and beverage establishments on the street and businesses and residents that do not have a drinking or dining component, giving them all of the information about no parking on the days and times, the detailed site plan, and my personal contact information, so that everyone on that block has had their bases covered in terms of outreach from the bid. So very briefly, I will go to the next slide, and then I'm done. And I'm happy to take questions. So here is the site plan. Apologies for the orientation, but it's the way the grid works. I know that maps should be oriented north, but this is actually oriented east and west. So here is Atlantic Avenue, which is the southern boundary. Here is State Street. We are moving the emergency lane to the east side of the street this year. And the reason for this is because last year it was on the west side of the street. And this is where there's side street parking. And there were numerous occasions where parked cars did not move or acknowledge the signs to move their cars prior to the street closures, which therefore you have a totally obstructed emergency lane at all times if someone forgets to move their car. So to avoid this from happening again, we flipped the emergency lane to now be on the east side of the streets, and the programming area / tables is now going to be on the east side of the street. I have it kind of closed off programming area in orange with dining on, the north end. This isn't, we're not wedded to this. This is just to say, this is where the dining and or programming is going to happen on any given day. And that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Sid, do you have anything that you want to say in regards to this presentation?
No, thank you for the offer.
Okay, thank you. Committee members, anyone have any discussion or questions?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Zero?
Yep.
Yes, I see you, sir.
I had a question about your the cleanup situation. How will you be cleaning the streets due to the fact they will be open streets and there'll be restaurants and things like that? Do you have a provision for that, or are you just staying with the typical sanitation department cleanup schedule?
In the outreach, which had the basically the work plan required by DOT as a part of the application, there is a line in that work plan that asks the restaurants to have their own bin outside and that they are responsible for sanitation generated by their establishment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Morales, I see your hand raised.
Hi, yes. Are there any, I'm sorry, I'm trying to visualize the block, but are there any like senior developments, nursing homes, rehabilitation centers that are within that area?
Not on the immediate block. That block, if I can help you visualize it, the entire east side is commercial, starting with Grand Army in the north, ending with Page Sargison Jewelers at the south. In between, you have Bijan and the Little Sweet Cafe and what used to be the Oaxaca Taqueria. And on the west side of the street, you have an empty building on the corner. You have a laundromat, you have a Mexican restaurant, and then it begins residential from mid-block all the way up to State Street.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Peterson, I see your hand raised.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I just, if I can ask a question about what it is exactly that the community is saying and or thinking.
The community that I've conducted outreach for thus far.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Sorry, I didn't know if you meant like
Yeah.
the community here tonight.
Oh, no.
So far, everyone on the block that I personally has spoken to, they're excited to have the open street come back, especially because it's going to be bookended by the closure of State Street. State Street is also going to be closed from Smith to Nevins. The only concerns I've heard was about the obstruction of the safety lane, which I take very seriously, which is why I've moved it. And also about bikes. Apparently a lot of bicycles like to fly through really quickly and have knocked over people's wine glasses. I'm sure worse things have happened in the world, but I think to that end, I'm making new barriers in general, because the ones were made last year, they had all of our dates and times on them. They weren't future proofed very well. So I'm going to emphasize as much as possible that bikes dismount before they even come into the street. Especially considering that State Street is also going to be closed and it's such a tiny little street. I want to have it as pedestrian friendly as possible.
Anything else, Ms. Peterson?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Yearwood-Young?
Thank you, Chair. I am right around the corner from this. I'm on State between Hoyt and Bond. So this one is near and dear to my heart and I love it. I'm actually sad that you guys aren't doing Friday evening. It's a great little block with cute establishments. You explained a little more about the barriers, which I'm happy to hear, and about the bikes. I did want to just, obviously the emergency lane is top priority, but I am a little concerned that moving the emergency lane, if it's not very clear that no one can pass through that other than emergency vehicles, that you do already have the bikes going really quickly. And this is moving the tables farther away from the restaurants that are the ones that put tables out, and just creating a situation where there's gonna be more foot traffic kind of crossing that emergency lane, and way more room for bikers to go by. So it's gonna be even harder to control bikers sort of flying through that block. So
Right.
I just was trying to understand how it's going to be indicated that that emergency lane is there going to be a barrier there that emergency vehicle would move? If they were coming by?
Say the last part again, I'm sorry.
Like exactly how is the emergency lane going to be marked off and kept clear and not be allowed to be used by, you know, bikers and worse like vehicles who are ignoring the open street?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I struggled with that because you're right. Like the wait staff are going to have to now cross the 15 feet to get to tables. It's also going to be like closer, like in front of people's like residential property. But I don't know how to move someone who parked their car and is not coming to move it. And then I have an obstructed lane on the other side, right? And like even right now, like the signs were not taken down and people have been parking there. And so I'm just more concerned about like, do we have, God forbid, an ambulance that comes down that street and they have to weave because of parked cars that didn't move when they were supposed to? Like, I don't know the enforcement ramifications of that, if I can have a car moved. In regard to the emergency lane in general, I was thinking we're having a kickoff with DOT on the 28th, and I'm sure Kyle can speak more to this. I was hoping to get another barrier and have a new sign printed that is like red and it specifically says like emergency lane. So if you are a bicyclist and you're coming, you know, from downtown Brooklyn heading south towards Borum Hill, like you see a red tarp that says emergency lane only. That's what I was thinking, but I'm very open to ideas because this is it's a very small street, and these ramifications of how I got to program all of these things is tricky. So I'm open to ideas, and I'm happy to change things if I need to.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I appreciate that it's a little bit of a tough decision either way.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Okay, Kyle, do you have any input as far as the bike lane is concerned?
Yeah, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyle Gorman. I'm from the city's Department of Transportation. I'm actually the next presenter, so I'll be coming up next. But I did want to just add a little bit more about the work that we do. Definitely understand the challenges about balancing bikes in open streets, but we also recognize that Hoyt Street is a really critical part of the Brooklyn Bike Network. So we'll definitely work a little bit closer with much closer with the BID and Kelly to talk a little bit more about the exact configuration of how to place the barriers, as well as different types of signage and other sort of tactical steps we've taken at other open streets to make sure that you know, it is safe as possible for all road users. I will just be incredibly candid. It is difficult to get perfection with the sort of existing configuration and the materials that we use, but I'm confident that some of the strategies that we can try out will definitely look to find better solutions to what's been done in the past.
Great. Thank you, Kyle, for your input. Okay. Latrell, I see your hand raised.
I'll be honest, I really don't know the street, but I guess my concern is if you said that there's residential on the block, and I'm just concerned if it's like elderly people or people with disabilities, how will they accessorized vehicle get to them? And if they're in a wheelchair or with a walker, or they need that extra support, how do that work?
So the residential, so that's actually a bigger problem because the residential is mostly is closer to State Street, which is also going to be a completely closed street. So if they were to need accessoride, okay, thank you, Kyle. Yeah, so accessoride can use the emergency lanes. So they'll have about 15 extra feet to walk as opposed to just being picked up from their front door or walking to a corner.
But what if they have a problem that they cannot walk that far? So they will be able to get into the accessorized closely in front of their location. Or if they have a visual impairment and they need that support to get close to get to the accessorized or in a walker.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm just going to chime in again. The accessoride can definitely use the emergency lane, as Kelly had said. Relatively speaking, this block of Hoyt is pretty short, and most of the residential is actually concentrated towards the north side of the block. So I definitely hear you. Any hardship is something that we're trying to avoid, but we find it to be reasonable, the amount of distance that they need to get to the corner, to get an Uber, to get picked up by a family or friend or whoever. But, you know, for those who rely incredibly on assessor ride, those will be accommodated without question throughout the open street.
So
Yeah,
all
and
the
I would like to add is,
all the accessorized vehicles are now blue and white. Some of them are like regular cabs, like black cabs. So if a accessorized, it's called broker services. So if a broker services will try to go in a block to go in the emergency lane and they're not the blue and white vehicle, what would take place for them? Will they be stopped, or how would that work for them? Because all accessorized, when you think of accessorized, you think of the blue and white van. So all accessorized is not the blue and white van.
so this is a very tight knit block, and I have, I'm on a first name basis with all of the merchants. So if this is an issue that came up and there was an accessoride that pulled up, I don't see Grand Army turning them away. Also, I'd like to add that this has not been an issue that has been brought to the bid's attention in the past. So if this had been an issue last year, we would have obviously been proactive about it this year. Also, I hand delivered a letter to every building, which did not happen last year. So if this is an issue, they'll reach out to me directly. And finally, I would like to add that actually right now, with the exception of one building on the corner, which would have the most access to either an emergency lane on Hoyt Street or State, none of the buildings themselves are accessible. They all have stoops. So the people living in them, the buildings themselves are not accessible. So I guess I'll wait to hear. And then, but as I said, this was not a complaint that came up last year. I addressed all of the concerns that came up last year, and accessibility was not one of them.
So Kelly, what you're basically saying is that the safety lane is the entire length of the block.
Correct.
So that the assessor right will have access for the entire length of the block.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, John, I see your hand raised.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for all the work that's going into the Open Streets program. I live here on Hoyt Street on the section that opens up from spring to fall, and we enjoy it a lot. We set up a little bistro set in our front garden to kind of like take part in the festivities. So we enjoy it thoroughly, and we're happy to see it coming back. That being said, we're concerned to see that the emergency lane move to the other side of the street, as was brought up earlier. But I understand the reasoning. I just wish that it would kind of create more of an impetus for cooperation for folks that have been parking there. You know, usually in past versions of this, I see a lot of like official use plaques on the cars that have stayed and violated the no parking times, whether it's city employees or police officers or the myriad of other folks who work in this area. I just was hoping to echo those concerns about the all the seating for the restaurants being on this side. A wider area does seem like the previous person commented, to create more of a avenue for bikes just to continue speeding through. I mean, hopefully they do see the signs and dismount. I wish there was a way to accommodate both, but if you have people crossing from the restaurant and pedestrians milling about and families playing and stuff, it's not a compatible mode of transportation. So I understand that, but I just hope that we can continue to work on it. Yeah, my question was about who closes and opens the street. I think that there are usually some commercial cooperation from it, but in my observations in the past, sometimes there's just like a missed memo of who's on first with that every time.
Okay, no, and I definitely hear you about the the emergency lane, and I'm gonna, Kyle and I will talk offline about what we can do to solve that, because I do hear you, and it is extremely complicated, right? Because there needs to be an emergency lane there. In terms of the barriers and the maintenance of the street, this year is going to be different because we are going to be having public programming. So what that will look like is on days when there's programming, either the staff of the bid will be setting up the barriers, and or if it's something as simple as I'll say it like a yoga class, we will be meeting with the yoga staff beforehand and giving them explicit instructions about where things go. But other than that, when it's just going to be dining, I have already met with Grand Army, and they have committed to their staff moving barriers out. And again, this year is going to look a little bit different because I don't find the two barriers like to be sufficient visual blockages for the block right now. So I in my mind, I really want to get two more and have print material on them so that it's more of an across the board, like there's nothing that should confuse you about whether the street is open or not. That's my goal. And Grand Army is committed to putting those out.
Thank you, Kelly. Alexandra, do you have a question? Comment?
Yes, thank you. My comment is that, so I'm a resident on State Street. I have two comments. The first one is, not everyone in the neighborhood is thrilled by the open street. It does create a tremendous amount of congestion when we need to drive around the neighborhood. So we're happy to see that it's going to be down a little bit on Friday nights, which is nice. The one thing that I would ask is, we've seen a number of times on weekends where the weather was not good, where there was literally no one sitting outside, and yet the streets are still blocked for the entire day. Is there a way that when we know there's going to be inclement weather, it's going to be raining or it's going to be stormy, and no activity is going to take place on the street, to see if then the streets could remain open? Because again, when you live in the neighborhood, I love the idea of open street, but when you leave and you have to drive around the neighborhood, those weekends are extremely, extremely difficult because of the traffic that it generates. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate your concerns. And that's why I am closing on Friday, just to make this a little less constricting. In terms of inclement weather, I mean, the thing about weather is it changes its mind, right? So I'm wary to allow parking and then it gets sunny out and then people are confused. I mean, if there's a Saturday or a Sunday where it's really, we're getting hurricane rain and it's gonna 100% not gonna happen, that could be a case when Grand Army, calls it and says, okay, we're not gonna put the barricades out today. But my only, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem, but my issue with that is it may confuse people about whether they can drive on that street or not, and the regular human being might not put it together. Oh, it's open because the weather's bad. They might not make that correlation intuitively. So I'm open to hear what Kyle thinks about that, if other areas close because of inclement weather. But the other thing I'd like to say is that, our bid has Atlantic Avenue, which is a truck route, and we get beaten with so much traffic. We're a Vision Zero priority corridor. I mean, we're asking for one little tiny street between BQE and the waterfront, and traffic it's awful for us too. And this is just like a little reprieve that we view as a boon to people's quality of life in the area more than
well, so my point is, again,
Alexandra,
I love the idea.
Alexandra, thank you very much. Okay, but there's no back and forth here. Okay, Ms. Gilman.
Thanks, Bill. Kelly, thank you so much for walking us through that. For disclosure, I'm also a member of the Atlantic Avenue bid, as well as a member of Community Board 2, just for everybody. And I've gotten to witness a lot of the great work that Kelly's been doing in her first year on the job, and the neighborhood's really lucky to have her. And I want to just confirm, it sounded like in this conversation between Kelly and Kyle that you guys will talk offline, and that the hope is for the community's sake and for the business's sake, and the whole point of this being for kind of ease of use and balanced quality of life for everyone with accessibility. We need those barriers to be legible and substantive enough. This has been a problem at, many open streets I'm sure you've been sitting in on, Kyle. But for this open street, if we're going to do something as big as move that emergency lane, if that ends up being the right call, when everything is said and done, and I'm sure you guys will make the right call there, we need to make sure that the neighborhood is equipped to do that. So whatever the Department of Transportation can do to provide for these open streets so that there's a fair chance that everybody can read and use them properly, we really need that to happen this year. That's been feedback the board has gotten time after time on these open street forums. So please continue that conversation for us. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Okay. If the committee members have no other questions, thank you very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the presentation Q&A for the DUMBO Business Improvement District. Kyle Gorman, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much. Hello again, everyone. So moving on to the next open street on the agenda tonight is the Washington Street Open Street. Like I mentioned earlier, I manage the entire Open Streets program across the entire city. So we've been doing a whole round of community board notifications and elected notifications, and you all are given actually 45 days to comment on any and all Open Streets applications in 2023. So after tonight, via the community board or via any of your elected officials at the city, state, or federal level, you are able to share any feedback that you want the city's Department of Transportation to have on record. But the official season will kick off in just a little over a month around Earth Day. But without further ado, let's get started on open streets in DUMBO. All right, so I'm sharing my screen now. Let me make it full screen. Great. So like I said, tonight we're here to talk about open streets in DUMBO, specifically the Washington Street Open Street. So before we zoom into what's going on in DUMBO, I wanted to also give you a brief update as to where the entire Open Streets program stands. Per legislation that was passed back in 2021, the Open Streets program is now permanent in New York City. This sort of mandates the Department of Transportation to create the rules, the guidelines, the requirements, the ins, the outs of what it takes to make an open street. So there's been a lot of work that we've been doing on the back end that I'll be able to share a little bit more in the future on, but know that it is now a permanent program in New York City. There's lots of new layers to the program and different types of supports. One of the last comments that we just heard on the previous presentation was about what is DOT actually doing to support our community partners. And thanks to an incredible investment by the city council and the mayor, we actually have a multi-million-dollar budget actually behind the program to support our partners through funding, through technical assistance, and for our highest need partners in the most underserved parts of the city, really providing the personnel to help set up barriers, provide the sweeping and cleaning, sanitation support, horticulture care, and so on. So you really do have quite an equilibrium of new types of layers and resources for support for our partners this year, which is incredibly exciting. We also have a whole new public space programming initiative, which similar to a lot of the plans that Kelly was talking about for Hoyt Street, we really see that, believe that we want open streets to be well used in a positive way. So scaling up programming and other types of opportunities like short-term concessions and beyond. Another part of the legislation that DOT is required to follow is that we have to evaluate any successful sites in the program and consider them for permanent infrastructure. So these are things that we've been doing already across the entire city, transforming open streets into pedestrian plazas, into shared streets, and other types of traffic calming and public realm infrastructure. So this is actually, like I said, a requirement of the legislation to permanently reclaim streets for pedestrians and cyclists. And just a short plug, the application is actually still open for anyone launching after July 1st. This would also include any school that might be interested in participating in Open Streets for next academic year. Open Streets is the new home of the Play Streets program, so folks can feel free to find the application at nyc.gov/openstreets to learn more. Given that we are in the Economic Development Committee tonight, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about how Open Streets plays a critical role in the city's ongoing economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, but also a huge opportunity for economic development. We recently released a report back in October 2022 about the economic benefits of the Open Streets program, where we specifically evaluated the Open Streets and how it economically impacted restaurants and bars on Open Streets corridors. And all of the metrics that we used to create the report really showed that Open Streets were faring infinitely better than non-Open Streets corridors. We took a look at just a handful of corridors around the city, but we do believe that the data that is in this report is really transferable to a multitude of other corridors all across the city. On Open Streets corridors, restaurants and bars saw a higher amount of sales growth. They also saw a number of new businesses, new restaurants and bars open during the pandemic, as well as keeping existing businesses that were open before the pandemic afloat above water during the pandemic when there were really significant economic challenges. Zooming in a little bit further to DUMBO, though, the DUMBO Business Improvement District, who I'm joined by tonight, also has done their own level of outreach, talking to all of the businesses and tenants that they represent across the district. And they found that 94% of office tenants actually support the public realm improvements that already exist within DUMBO's public realm, including Brooklyn Bridge Park, the pedestrianized Washington Open Street, as well as the DUMBO Archway, where a pedestrian plaza is. So really, at the end of the day, this is not only good for the people that own the businesses, but as well as the people who work in them as well. Really, now zooming into the Washington Street Open Street, I would really say that it is one of the program's most successful and iconic open streets. I think, you know, as many of you have seen who've had the opportunity to visit this street, it is a tremendous draw for people that want to enjoy all of the great businesses that are in the neighborhood and come and take a seat and maybe meet a friend, enjoy a cup of coffee, have a chat, or obviously take in the iconic views that are seen on this street. The BID has done an amazing job of doing a lot of great public programming and space for gathering. They had a really unique 6-foot stage that they implemented on the open street to really help over 20 different types of artists and other cultural providers across New York City who were equally being hurt during the pandemic. We focus a lot, of course, on the business economy, but there's a huge cultural economy also in New York. So the BID was really doing their part to make sure that we were supporting those different types of programming and cultural institution and artists across New York City. And then, like I said, of course, this is a huge opportunity for economic development. There's businesses that are able to currently offer outdoor dining on the block, as well as with the public seating. It really just supports the to-go sort of style, grab and go sort of opportunities and that exist within DUMBO. So it has a much wider sort of impact economically beyond just this block. And, I also want to be frank, with or without the open street on Washington Street, pedestrians are naturally drawn to the street to take in the iconic views and all that this neighborhood has to offer. I was actually around the neighborhood at the beginning of the year when the open street was not active. And there were hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were in the street taking photos, just enjoying all of the iconic views, the beautiful architecture, and all of the amazing facets that make this such a desirable place for people to live and visit. So I really want to underscore that the city does recognize that this is an incredibly desirable place to visit, and we want to make sure that people are doing it in the safest way possible. So getting a little bit into the more nuanced details about the Washington Open Streets, it launched in July 2020. The BID applied to the program during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic to help support all of our businesses in the area, like I've already touched on, provides much needed economic support, more space for social distancing, and generally just more public space overall. On a day-to-day basis, it features outdoor dining, public seating, more space for programming, and as well as just a generally pedestrianized streets. The day-to-day management falls to the DUMBO Business Improvement District, so they're the ones who are setting up the tables and chairs, the barriers, coordinating programming, sweeping, cleaning, and just being our amazing partner on the block level to manage the open street. Like I mentioned at the top of the conversation, all open streets applications are reviewed by DOT, as well as their sister agencies, including NYPD, the fire department, DSNY, and so on, before we approve. And then once all of that internal review is done, all of those applications then advance onto the community board and elected officials for their comments and feedback before launching in April. So these are the overview of the plans for what is on the docket for 2023 on Washington Open Streets. The plan as of now is to launch the Open Street on April 1st. That is still pending some ongoing construction in the neighborhood, which I'll touch on in just a second. After review of the application and to keep things consistent with how things have been done in the past, we are going to continue to approve a 7-day schedule for the Open Streets program, which will follow 7 days, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. schedule. And the Open Street will last until the end of the year on December 31st. Basically from April 1st to December 31st, 7 days a week, the Open Street will be in effect from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. And if the bid does so wish to continue again for 2024, they will have to apply again, and you will see my smiling face in a year from now talking to you again about what's planned for Washington Street. We're seeing actually more businesses participate on the Washington Open Street. The new bar/restaurant Gare on the corner is going to be opening soon and going to be offering outdoor dining. Sweet Green will continue to offer outdoor dining and serve the customers that go there. And like I mentioned earlier on, open public seating continues to support anyone who might have purchased something else in the neighborhood and wants a place to enjoy it. The bid is working on a number of different strategies to manage the pedestrian and traffic in the area. So they're looking to hire ambassadors that will help to reduce conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles. This is also, done in a way to also improve vehicular flow throughout the neighborhood. The idea is to deploy them at peak hours. They're not necessarily going to be there from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. 7 days a week, but we're going to work with the bid to identify what those peak hours are and make sure that these ambassadors are deployed strategically. Some final details are still being worked out between DOT and the bid, and we'll be sure to follow up on them very soon. Always, there's always more room and better opportunities to do better communication and outreach. So we'll continue to regularly notify all types of stakeholders about open streets and any updates that might be coming to the open street, whether that be through the community board, elected officials. We also really encourage everyone to follow all of the bid social media channels, also signing up for the newsletter. I would also advise you to sign up for the DOT social media and newsletters. You can get other updates about this open street and any other open street across the city. Another thing I wanted to touch on is that as we've done in the past, we're working in close coordination with all of the different construction companies that have been working in the area. The Front Street final restoration is upcoming and detours will be required, but we are hoping that everything on Front will end in May or early June. So that's really going to alleviate a lot of the construction that's been happening in this part of the neighborhood. That, definitely, the open street obviously has an impact on traffic, and when balanced with the construction, undoubtedly there are traffic impacts, but we are really relieved to hear that that construction is actually going to be shifting to the west side of the neighborhood, away from where this part of the open street is, and hopefully with the addition of the traffic ambassadors or increased communications and working closely with the construction companies, a lot of the traffic issues will be improved. And then the final item that I want to touch on is some streetscape upgrades that we're working on with the bid. Like I mentioned at the top of the conversation, per the legislation that DOT is legislated to require, we have to take a look and evaluate successful sites on an annual basis and identify with our community partners and the wider sort of community at large about different types of opportunities that exist for streetscape upgrades. So we've been talking to the DUMBO bid in coordination with BIG, a design firm that's local to DUMBO, but has done work all around the world on some streetscape upgrades that I'm going to touch on in just a second. We've also been working with the bid on their advocacy for loading zones along Water Street. DOT is in receipt of that request, and we'll have further details to provide soon. So moving on to the streetscape upgrades that I was talking about, this is a rendering of what those upgrades exactly look like. The idea is to sort of add new elements that continue to sort of create a draw for folks to visit this open street, but also add more open public seating, increase greenery, and just a better delineation and use of space, in addition to the loose tables and chairs that have been provided out there already. So here's a sort of bird's eye view or a site plan view of what the open street will look like when it's active. Like we were talking about with the Hoyt Street open street, we're also really critically committed to making sure that emergency access is maintained at all times. You can see that there is an emergency lane still down the middle, but there's new elements like planters that will be used to close the street that are on casters so that they can roll. Instead of the metal barriers that we were using, there's also going to be these new fixed benches that will live in the parking lane, as well as movable benches to sort of give more people opportunities to sit, in addition to the movable tables and chairs. It also creates a unique opportunity for, or a unique venue, I should say, for some of the programming that the bid has been doing over the last couple of years. So a really sort of light touch, but highly impactful streetscape upgrade to this particular open street. And this is the inactive conditions. This is basically overnight. So you can see right down the middle here, the emergency lane also overnight acts as the moving lane when the open streets are not active. All of the elements are pushed to the parking lane, so they're completely out of the way when the open streets are not active, so folks can still drive in as needed overnight, but they will have to leave by the morning. So you can generally see this is where everything is living. This is where the movable planters and the movable benches are going to be living in the curb lane. The bid and BIG team are here tonight to answer any more nuanced questions that you might have related to this specific streetscape upgrade. So we can definitely answer any of those if they're had after the presentation. But that is actually the final slide that I had tonight. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll turn it back over to the chair for questions.
Great, thank you, Kyle. Okay, I'm just going to mention two things, and then I will bring it to questions. One of the things I've came to my attention is that the bid has agreed to fund a dedicated traffic officer as requested by the DAC, and that traffic officer will help maintain traffic through the area. And also, I'm going to read a letter that I received from the DUMBO Action Committee. There's some items of concern that they wanted to talk about. One, the open street program be reduced to weekends only when tourist traffic peaks. Two, the sponsors of the open street be responsible for accurate and timely communication to residents on the program. Three, the sponsors of the open street fund a dedicated traffic safety officer, which they have already done. Okay. Four, the sponsors of the open street fund and promote a campaign to proactively encourage visitors and tourists to take public transit instead of driving and or arriving via tour bus. And five, the addition of residents to the supporting organization DUMBO bid. Okay. Sorry about that. DUMBO bid board of directors to ensure there is resident input as to the management and programming of our open street. There are currently no residents without local business interest conflicts on the DUMBO bid board. And as such, there is no residential input on how our neighborhood open street is implemented. Okay, with that, okay, I will begin to, yes, Sid, there, I see your hand. I was looking for you, Sid.
First of all, thank you, Bill. You know, I'm chair of the Transportation Committee, and I wish you all good luck in having a lively discussion tonight. We've had ours as well. Kyle and I had our disagreements last year. As far as I'm concerned, that's over. The DOT has made significant changes in how they present this. DOT has begun to actually listen a little bit. They made a change on Willoughby, which we worked very hard on with DOT, and I applaud them for making the change, so that I'm thankful for the fact that they are actually listening. All right, I do think it's best when the community and the board and the neighbors and DOT listen to one another and come up with a solution that's hopefully best for everybody else. I'm not going to take a position on this. As I said, I think they've made some changes that make it much more like a pedestrian street that I've seen in Europe, where the deliveries take place in the morning and people get it, can have time to get in and out of the street. And I hope you have a lively discussion, and good luck.
Thank you, Sid. Appreciate your positive thinking there. Okay, committee members, I'm looking to see if anyone has their hand raised. Ms. Peterson, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Flanoy. I want to just kind of come on the back of Sid and say, one of the things that comes to mind for me and all of these situations that involve DOT, open streets, closed street, whatever all of this is that's going on, changing the entire face of Brooklyn. I think of the word equitableness, and I think of the word, as it was stated by someone, about representation. Because if you want to do something in an equitable way, I think it's best, at least in my experience, to have everybody to be a part of the conversation and then come somewhere in the middle. It always seems that perhaps it's sort of lopsided. And so I wanted to say that. And I think it gets to be a debate in the back and forth, not because, the concept may not be an okay concept. It's just how people who want to contribute to that conversation are excluded from it, perhaps in the way that they should be invited to be a part of it. I just want to make one other comment. I hear community. I've heard the word community several times from the presenter. I heard the word outreach several times from the presenter. And so my thoughts was, outreach to who, community, what? I know that DUMBO, in the backdrop or in the front of DUMBO, sits a housing development, and it seems like it seems that all the things that are going on. No, it's not DUMBO, but it's a part of DUMBO, depending on who you're talking to and what you're talking about. Farragut houses sit over there with 1,400 units of housing, and it just seems that there's just perhaps this disregard, even in sharing, because I haven't heard it. So if it has happened, then I stand to be corrected. Even sharing, what you're doing, because that is your neighboring community, which whether one wants to, cut it out from being right there, that community sat there long before DUMBO came into being. And so I think there's some things that either somebody could share with me or correct me if I'm wrong. And I'd like to know, was anybody else, in the neighboring community, was there any outreach or any community or conversation, or were any of those people invited to speak to that topic?
So I can take this one if that's all right. So I'm Alexandria. I run the DUMBO Improvement District. We actually see Washington Street as like a great democratic space where people can all access the beautiful views of Washington Street in a safe and enjoyable way. We use one of the primary ways, one of our biggest events of the year actually is a major fundraiser for PS 307 and the Dock Street School that we work very closely with those two PTAs and a lot of the community members from Farragut for sure. And we, it's also, the main parade route for our Halloween celebration, where we literally do a ton of outreach and try and make, we do a lot of work to make sure that our events and programming are all free and open, and that this is a place you can come and sit. You don't even have to have, we want everybody to be able to use the space for sure.
But the question hasn't been answered. I'm just going to say that I'm going to leave it alone. I'm still not feeling comfortable with understanding what I'm trying to ask, and perhaps there, can be some other conversation. But I still want to know, in that neighboring community, there's a church that sits there. There's some, thousands of residents that live there. There are people who would be a part of the resident association to, that group that can be a part of a conversation to share what it is that's going on behind DUMBO. It's just whatever's going on in DUMBO is going on. And, we can throw a Halloween party and that still doesn't really make me feel comfortable enough to say, well, okay, you have some programming and that's wonderful. But I think the material part of it, people being a part of a conversation to be informed. And I'm just gonna leave it there at that. And so I would like to know the answer to that, because I don't think that has been answered. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Flournoy.
I can also just add, we do, so something like our 6-foot platform, which is a artist opportunity, we put that open call out. We do outreach to the tenant association. We do outreach through, both council members' offices. This is certainly on our mind, and we would welcome any suggestions of others that we should be reaching out to make sure that this is on track.
Okay, thank you. Any other community members or board members have any comments or questions?
Are you going to call on people or?
After I finish looking to see if any committee members want to speak.
Ms. Mosso has her hand raised.
Okay, Ms. Mosso, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I was looking for you.
Hi, thank Carlos for a great presentation. But when you speak about DOT, do you speak about DOT with the disability person who's in charge of the disability part in DOT? Is he part of the conversation when you speak about DOT for accessibility? Is he part of the, I think his name is Edmund. Is he part of the conversation when you speak about it? Because, okay, because that's one of my concerns. I think the lady before got a little offended with me, and I'm sorry if I offended her anyway, but as a person with a disability, if you see me, some people don't know I have a disability, and I have a disability. So some people may live in a residence that they have been living in for years, and they're not going to leave because, it's a great community and they may have a disability. So I want that to be taken in consideration. Also, when you think about, there's some local cab companies, there's New Bell cab company that I use. Please don't get upset. I'm just want to express my opinion. But New Bell cab drivers, some of them tell me they don't go certain areas to pick up people because it's open streets. So that's not, you don't even have to be a disability. You could be an older person, or you could be even a younger person. So I guess that's my concern. When you speak about DOT, are you speaking about the full DOT? Is Edmund in the conversation? And, like even to go to a restaurant, I went to a restaurant one day and literally my friend called me. I was in a taxi. She told me get out at so-and-so location and she'll come meet me because it was an open street. So I'm not knocking open streets, but I am concerned about people with disabilities and who's elderly without disabled, how this affecting them. That's just my concern. And when y'all speak about, do y'all really reach out to the whole community? And I spoke to Alexander before. So Alexander, I have a good rapport with you. So I think you're fabulous, but do you really speak out to the whole community when you speak about open streets? Please don't get upset. I'm just expressing my opinion.
Totally.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
I spoke to both of y'all. I took questions out of both of you guys.
Okay. Latrell, I'm sure they understand that. Alexandra, do you want to answer first and then Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to speak to kind of the outreach. We have an email that goes out weekly. We have a very active Facebook page where we're sharing lots of information. We actually, the DUMBO Action Committee, we had been meeting with them monthly for a very long time. They've asked to do that every other month now. So we're open and very happy to meet with people all the time. And we do a lot of communicating, and if are very happy to the idea that we don't communicate with residents feels we are absolutely happy to communicate and will continue to do so. And then
can I say something? I didn't say about
Latrell, let her finish. Let her finish, Latrell. Go on, consider.
About the open streets, yeah. I mean, we put up communications about the open streets in all of these channels that I just discussed.
Okay, Latrell, you had something else you wanted to say?
I was talking about open streets. I wasn't talking about interacting with the community.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Kyle, do you want to respond also?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely work, and I want to just be clear that Edmund, who is our accessibility officer at the city's Department of Transportation, we work in close coordination on accessibility across open streets, and of course, he works across our entire agency. I work for the city's Department of Transportation, so we definitely work very closely with Edmund on a day-to-day basis. As I said in the previous presentation for Hoyt, we take accessibility really seriously here and make accommodations as needed without question or any back and forth. We are not trying to preclude anyone from going about their day-to-day lives. So if there's any specific issues to an open street that you live nearby or visit, you can definitely feel free to reach out to us directly, and we can connect you to our partner and sort of facilitate a discussion to make sure that your needs are being met.
Great, thank you, Kyle. Next, I see Ms. Morales.
Yes, thank you. So I want to thank those that are representing the bid and DOT for trying, right, for doing better. I see that, especially compared to previous years. And so I want to thank you for those efforts. I also understand the importance and the benefits of open streets, at the same time understanding that those that do not support it, the impact it has on their lives. That being said, I think we should always keep this line of communication open, especially with residents, and figure out how to meet in the middle and maybe tweak things. And at some points, not every block where there's open street is there meant that open streets actually works, right? So we have to take that into consideration. So I thank you, Ms. Peterson and Latrell. I agree with both their statements, and I understand the outreach is being done, but not everyone is on the bid email list or follows DOT. And so I think, while I understand bids also have very tight budgets, I think that this is where we need to get the city involved. We need outreach, what I call street outreach, many of us call street outreach, with people on the actual ground. And so I guess one of my suggestions, and any public official's office who's there, or a DOT maybe even, where you guys can provide more of that to street outreach persons to inform people about the events right, and happening in our communities, and that's everywhere across the city. But especially my priority is the public housing residents in the district. So we have to do better at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Morales. Andy, you're on the board, you want to speak?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hi, Andy Dietrich, a member of the Parks Committee on the board, DUMBO resident. I want to put this in context quickly, and then I have a question. In context, this is as much as the DOT can do as I read it under the Open Streets program. It's much more like a street closure than an Open Streets program. It is 7 days a week, 13 hours a day, which is the maximum period of time to begin under the program for the entire year. It's not even seasonal. So it lasts until the end of the year. So this is a decision not to open a street to allow outdoor seating at a restaurant, or to open a street during, for community events in the summer. This is the closure of a New York City street, effectively to traffic, being done under the ruse of an Open Streets program. Now that might be a good decision and it might be a bad decision, I don't know, but it's inappropriate to close a street permanently under the Open Streets program, I believe. So my question is specific, which is, what work has the DOT done on traffic patterns in DUMBO that's consistent with closing a city street? And have they considered a weekend approach as opposed to 7 days a week? And what have they thought about the traffic patterns in and out of DUMBO? When we think about the way the street works, anybody familiar with DUMBO, there's one way in right now, which is Front Street, and one way out, which is Water Street. This is the connection between Front and Water. So everybody that goes into DUMBO when this street is closed, or the ones to get out of DUMBO, is going to be driving extra 2 or 3 blocks through dense city streets. And they're going to be doing that 13 hours a day, probably more than that, because the street has to be open for the open streets, 13 hours a day, 7 days a week for the entirety of this year, under a program which is supposed to just be for seating and restaurants. And by the way, the only restaurant on that street right now is Sweet Greens, right? This isn't a restaurant. This is the city wanting a space for tourists to come and take pictures. That might be in New York City's interest, but the reason why the residents really haven't been consulted on this is because the residents, for the most part, are against it. But my question is specific. Has DOT done the work, the homework necessary to close a city street and look at traffic patterns? And I'd like the DOT representative to address that, please.
Great, thank you for your question. So just to zoom out, to add my own context, the city really is moving towards making more streets prioritize pedestrians, cyclists, and public transit. There is no more room in our city to accommodate vehicles. I'm sure a lot of you are skewed into the conversations about the BQE, and there's a lot of discourse about vehicles there too. But generally speaking, through the Open Streets program and through the public space unit, DOT really is trying to reclaim as much of the roadway for pedestrians and cyclists, since that's the predominant way that people get around New York City, and public transit, I should add, because there really is just no more space to add cars, especially in a small neighborhood, to your point, that doesn't have as many in and out connections for people who might be driving. Zooming back into your specific question, we are, of course, definitely always, on a day-to-day basis, we're managing traffic and evaluating traffic all across the city. And then secondly, we also will be doing an upcoming traffic study for the entire neighborhood. We've been working with our elected officials and other agencies on that. I do not have much to share beyond that tonight, but there is a formal traffic study in the works that will touch on a number of different things, including open streets, general traffic, pedestrian traffic, loading, parking, all the things that fall within our portfolio.
How do you, without a traffic study?
One second, Andy. One second. Okay. I was going to have to say one comment here. Andrea, how many businesses are actually on that street?
So we have several businesses. We have just kind of starting going down. We have Peas and Pickles, which does have food, takeout food. We have Joe Coffee, the salon, Gare is just opened this year. A restaurant that will have outdoor dining on the block. On the other side, we have a newly opening soon lighting store. There's Sweet Green and a clothing shop.
And thank you. I apologize. I mispronounced your name.
That's okay. Yeah, no, this is a completely commercial block, I will say. So this is office buildings above. This is not an open street on the residential block.
Good, thank you. Okay, Andy, you had a follow-up question.
I just had a quick follow-up question, which is how DOT thinks about having a baseline for a traffic study if the street's already going to be closed. So don't you need a baseline with the street open and then with the street closed, or how do you think about that?
So the street is not closed. It's designated as an open street daily from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., but it is not a fully closed street.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. With it, as closed as it can be under the program. So with access restricted, meaning that people aren't able to use it to get in and out of the neighborhood, including delivery people and everything else, for most of the day. Do you have a study with that as a baseline? Or how do you, because you said you're doing a traffic study, but how do you do a traffic study about a decision when the decision's already been made?
So I don't have the specifics to the traffic study to share tonight, but I am assuming that the study would be done in the context of the Washington Street open street continuing on a 7-day schedule from 10 to 9.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to continue down the line, the list, okay, by who I see first. Richard Morrow, I see you.
Hi, actually, I'm using Richard's facilities. My name is Eleanor Alper. As an artist, I've known as Eleanor Kupenko. I'm a resident of DUMBO, and I'm out very early in the morning, and I know from being out on my scooter, my push scooter, and also my bungee pumps, my exercise poles, that as early as 7:30, there are people on Washington Street taking photos. And whether it's closed or not, they're going to be there. They'll actually, ruin the chance of any car going through because they come in so many numbers that it actually is like a jam. But I'll tell you what's great about them, and I love going there. They're very happy. And I don't know if you can measure happiness, but I say that they're some of the happiest tourists I've ever seen. And I've lived in the Village and other neighborhoods where tourists come. And I think it's a great thing for DUMBO to be able to contain and to entice so many people to come into our neighborhood. And they're happy, they're going to be spending money, they're going to be eating, they're going to be doing good things. But anyway, I'm all for having all these people come to take remarkable pictures of themselves and the view to send all over the world. And I say, bravo for DUMBO. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Sherry Moody.
Hi, how are you? So I'm also a resident of DUMBO. I live between Washington and Plymouth. So I have a couple comments and then a question. I am not for closing this street 7 days a week. I sell medical devices that are used in emergencies. This summer, between the street closures and construction and Washington, it took me an hour to get to a hospital where a patient could have very well expired because there is no way out of DUMBO, especially when you close down Washington. So I don't have an emergency vehicle. I just have my car. And then on to flip side it, God forbid somebody has an emergency and they need to get out of DUMBO. There's just no way because the neighborhood's not big enough. You have the park, you have plenty of public space where the tourists can go get food and enjoy it. Really the only restaurant is Sweet Green, and Gare's only going to be serving tapas and it's only at night. So you can't really even count Gare. So what are we going to do in case of these emergencies, and how am I going to get to a hospital for patients on the table in a timely fashion with what's going on and the havoc the traffic is causing currently in DUMBO and with open streets 7 days a week for 13 hours?
Thank you, Sherry.
I mean, I suggest if you required, the necessary facilities and license plates like an emergency vehicle would have, you should do that. There are definitely channels and avenues for you to do that. As we said, there will also be an emergency lane on the street. So if anyone, whether it be a fire or medical emergency, there's the emergency lane that's active at all times on the open street. And let me also be clear, with or without this open street, there's a lot of traffic in this neighborhood. So whether it's designated as an open street or not, there's still going to be a tremendous amount of cars that are coming to Dumbo. And like I said at the previous comment, the city really is taking great strides in making sure that people prioritize walking, biking, or taking public transit if they are able to do so. So, I hear you on doing the job that you have to do, but we're also realistically balancing a lot here.
Great, thank you, Kyle. I'd like to remind everyone to please keep your comments or questions to 2 minutes, please. Next, I see Jan Bell.
Thank you so much. I'll keep it brief. I've lived and worked in Dumbo for 25 years. I'd like to echo what Eleanor said. The tourists are there from 7 a.m. till midnight on Washington Street. Since the advent of Instagram, that it actually was very dangerous when Instagram first began. And I'd see a lot of cab drivers with the tourists with their back to the cars because the cars are moving away from the river. The tourists have their back to the river, taking the photos, extremely dangerous. I'm amazed a terrible accident hasn't happened. And since the Open Streets program and the work of the Dumbo bid, I feel like there's been eyes on that. And also a great cultural exchange internationally. And it's actually much safer when there is cultural programming on that street. And even though there may only be Sweet Green, there's Front Street Pizza right there on the corner. I see people getting pizza from there and going sitting at the tables and chairs. And peas and pickles, people get food from there and go and sit outside. People buy food from many other small business in the neighborhood and go and sit on Washington Street to enjoy it. And those tourists are there 7 days a week. So as far as studying actual vehicular traffic, let's look at the numbers of the people because they're there whether or not. And I think the Open Streets program really does help with the safety of Washington Street rather than the dangerous. And in my 25 years, I've watched that street in particular and the whole of Dumbo go from derelict and dangerous to extremely desirable. And I do see a lot of programming where the kids from the school in Vinegar Hill and Farragut Housing come down to Dumbo, especially the Dumbo Drop and other programming that happens in the Archway as well. And Dumbo's noisy, it's ever growing, it's a cultural destination, it is an international destination. And, as someone who's lived there a very long time, I just absolutely love it still. And I try and roll with the changes. We have more coffee shops than I could ever believe would be there and more children than I ever thought would be there. And I think things like the Open Streets are positive for families and visitors from far and away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Okay, next I see, hold on one second, Kasia. So Kasia,
Yes.
Redbeard Bikes. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
No, you did great for a first time. Thank you. Kasha from Redbeard. We are, I'm the co-owner of a bike shop and Bike Fit Studio. We've been here for 10 years, proudly in Dumbo. And I just want to applaud the comments from Jan and Eleanor. I agree. The tourists here are so happy. It's incredible. I love to just go sit on Washington Street and people watch. And it's a great break from my work. I enjoy seeing all the photos being taken. It's actually just really great. It's like everybody was saying, the joy is so apparent. Amtrak has a thing. They say no heartbeat, no seat. Cars don't have heartbeats. We need to give the streets back to people with heartbeats. I think I don't want to repeat everything that was being said, but I guess I'll just add that it's going to take more than a year or two for us to reap the benefit of any single open street. This is a cultural shift that needs to happen. We in New York City, it's going to be crucial to our comeback and to keep maintaining a vibrant city life for us to have public open space where people can sit, where it doesn't have to be a transaction, where maybe you don't have to buy any food. You could bring your own sandwich. I remember as a teenager bringing my own food from home and sitting on a bench in the city. I just can't say enough about it. I think the Dumbo bid does a tremendous job cleaning it. It's the cleanest street in Dumbo. I would say I see them sweeping it constantly. And frankly, we need the tourist dollars. As a business here, I will tell you, we left our street. After 10 years, we had to leave our space on J Street. We could not afford the rent there. And we are now in a tiny little space on the corner of Bridge and John. So now we're like away from the action, but the rent is high. We need every single tourist dollar. And I just want to point out that back in the day when there was nothing here, this wasn't a desirable place to live. And all the residents that are complaining about tourists, I mean, you know, all these buildings in which they live, they wouldn't have been here 10, 20 years ago. So thank you, DOT, thank you, Dumbo Bid, and thank you to the community board for hearing my thoughts tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Next, I see Jimmy Ng.
Hi there. Thanks for the time to speak. My name is Jimmy. I'm lived in Dumbo overlooking Washington Street directly for about 9 years. For the record, I love open streets and what they do. My concern is the context that this open street happens in, which is one of the densest, smallest neighborhoods in the city. It's as if, you know, I think there are three constituencies that I think are represented here. There are business owners, there are the tourists that don't necessarily exist in other BIDs, and then there are residents. I feel that there are so many accommodations being made for businesses and tourists specifically, but residents are kind of left with the hangover of the impact of this open street. I love open streets, but I think the impact and the adjacent downstream negative impact that this has on residents is what I have a strong objection to. It's wild how, you know, cars pour into this neighborhood every weekend, which I love. I live in a neighborhood where everyone else wants to come here. But cars pouring in and spending 30 minutes just to circle 3-4 blocks magnifies, it feels like we're living in a hangover. And I feel like we're not given any consideration or voice, and it's very frustrating. Tourists do drive. They come in the form of coach buses, smaller buses. They come in every form. It's terrifying to see how much traffic gets crammed into here and the adjacent impact. I love open streets, but in the context of how it happens in Dumbo, it's I think the open street is being requested for 13 hours a day. That is for 7 days a week. That is 54% of the week being closed. The other 46% is in the middle of the night. The next open street in this district, CB2, is I think 30% of the week closed. And that's in Atlantic Avenue, abutting a dead end street. We live in the densest, busiest street in New York City. And we have a street that's closed, like Andy said, presumably under open streets for 54% of the time. I feel very strongly that the impact is just, we're not being given consideration as residents. I don't have a question. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. Next, I see Susan Quint.
Suzanne. Hi, everyone.
Oh, sorry, Suzanne. My apologies.
I first want to say that I just really appreciate this forum. It's so important. I took note, Kate, you talked about earlier about balanced quality of life for everyone. And Denise, I literally jotted down your word lopsided because it really resonated with me. The reason why I, had spent time on community board too, I spent time with Dumbo Action Committee, and I'm here speaking tonight, is because I feel very passionately about having the voice of residents and people who live in these communities be heard. And Dumbo is a place where I think people forget that it's a residential neighborhood. It's not how it came up, but it is now first and foremost a residential neighborhood. We are the second fastest growing residential neighborhood in New York City after Long Island City, if anyone's wondering. And the conversation is lopsided, and we are asking for the conversations to be reset. I want to thank Alexandria and her team for some of the conversations. We did ask for traffic agents. They will be funding those with their budget increase. We do think that's necessary. We appreciate that. I personally and Dumbo Action Committee advocated hard to have a pure resident on the board. There is now one. We hope there's two soon, again, like Denise was getting at, people for a programming committee that contributes to this. I'm concerned that we asked for a reduction of hours to ideally weekends only, and there was an additional hour. I don't think that that's creating a balanced quality of life for everyone. So those would be my comments and my asks. My other ask that I will mention, I'm just seeing it today, is on the designs. I'm wondering if those platforms, those benches, if they could be sort of more of a platform to further curtail or contain the tourists to be in that block. Maybe that was part of the design, to have them be platformy and step upable. But I think that can only help. But just in closing, looking to create balance in the conversation. And if we are able to, we would like to ask the community board to do an action recommending that there's some modifications that further put in some of this balance with some curtailment of the hours. Thank you.
I just want to speak.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Is it all right if
Yeah.
I? Thank
By
you.
all means, yes.
I just want to thank Suzanne for explaining the design concept for us. So totally that, the hope is to really continue to draw people to the commercial block. So that's absolutely what we're trying to be responsive to. And some of the, all of those elements are movable, flexible, and strategically going to be placed particularly at the end of the street to kind of curtail some of the unwanted vending that might pop up there. This is definitely what we are trying to use this furnishing for. And I think just to speak to the rest of the other DUMBO action committees, concrete ask was about a marketing campaign about Don't Drive to Dumbo, which we 100% have committed to doing as well. So.
Okay, thank you. Kyle, I have a question for you. How does the DOT feel about hours and the 7 days a week? Are they flexible about that?
So we are definitely open to any feedback or comments that the board wants to share in the form of a letter, but we do feel pretty confidently that we would like to keep the schedule 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Obviously, nothing is set in stone just yet, but given the streetscape improvements that are coming to the table and some of the comments about the fact that there's going to be people here all day, every day, regardless of the open street. Of course, we want to balance the need for people to do loading and deliveries and things like that before 10 in the morning, but we are pretty committed to the 7 day a week schedule.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next I see Jeffrey Salvatore.
Hi, everyone. I have lived in Dumbo for 7 years. The entirety of the 7 years I've lived in the block south of the open street on Washington. I think I'll echo my neighbors here and just talk about how much I think this is in kind of conflict with residential quality of life. And I think the residents of the neighborhood have really been left out of this conversation wholeheartedly. Few specific things that I just wanted to note. One is the proximity that this open street has to other open spaces, including other open spaces that the bid has that they can use for programming. So there's a triangle that's being redeveloped as part of a streets project that's going to make our neighborhood wonderful. The streets project that's been completed thus far is making our neighborhood better. However, there's space that the bid has to do programming elsewhere in the neighborhood, both in the Archway and in the Pearl Street Triangle. Secondly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the economic benefits, since that's the committee that we're talking in front of here. We've talked about the one, maybe two, if you count Peas and Pickles, restaurants that are going to be able to utilize this space. What does that mean? Most of this being closed is just for tourists. and it's allowing tourists to congregate in the street. And, you know, I take offense to some of the comments that have been had here, because just because someone wants to stand in a street and take a photo doesn't mean that we necessarily need to close the street. I'm right now in my office. I am a stone's throw from Times Square. People take photos in front of my office every day of Times Square. The street is not closed. However, there have been pedestrian enhancements that have made the block safer for me as a worker, but also for tourists that are visiting the neighborhood. So I don't like this extremity that just because there's tourists and people are taking photos means we need to close the street 13 hours a day, 7 days a week. I love the designs. I think that they could be very impactful for the neighborhood, for both residents and tourists. That's not what this is about. This is about how out of scale this is with the situation at hand. And I think that the DOT has really allowed for this to be out of scale by saying that it's going to be 7 days a week. And I would just echo my neighbors that there is a compromise here that is not 7 days a week, 13 hours a day, but is something more manageable. How about just weekends when the tourist influx is greater? There are a lot of things that I think would be very receptive to neighbors and to residents that would be seen as more of a compromise in this situation instead of kind of the all-out war against us as residents that we're feeling right now. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Okay. Kyle, would you like to respond to the comment about 7 days a week and possibly having some sort of way to doing it either just on weekends or reducing the time on weekdays?
So like I said, you know, the community board, if you all want to share in your formal feedback letter to us about, you know, asking us to adjust the times. But like I said, we're pretty committed to the 7 day a week 10 to 9 schedule.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Okay, next I see Cynthia McKnight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cynthia McKnight. I'm the president of the Community Education Council for District 13 and the former PTA president of the Dock Street School, a public middle school in DUMBO. I support the open streets in DUMBO because it allows our students to enjoy the outdoors safely. The Dock Street School does not have an outdoor playground, and we benefit tremendously from the open streets. The Dock Street School is a school in need, and we rely on donations from local businesses such as Sweet Greens, Westville DUMBO, Front Street Pizza, Vocabulary, and others to support our school. I know you may think that your tax dollars are enough to fund schools, but it is not, and we need the help of the DUMBO community to address the inequities in education for Black and Brown children. The DUMBO businesses also hire from the local Black and Brown community, specifically Farragut houses and other nearby public housing, and money from the tourists visiting the open streets benefits everyone. Fundraisers from the DUMBO Drop for the Dock Street School and PS 307 on Washington Street is an epic event thanks to the tourists that visit the open streets on Washington Street. Tourists also purchase artwork from the 60 Collective Art Exhibition on Washington Street, and proceeds were donated to the Dock Street School. The Dock Street School has students with different learning abilities, such as autistic students. The open streets make traveling easier when making school trips to local businesses and art studios. For all these reasons, the Dock Street School and District 13 Community Education Council support the continuation of open streets in DUMBO. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McKnight. Okay. Next I see yes. Okay, if you want to 11201, yes. If you want to open streets. We can't hear you, you're still muted. Thank you.
Yes, so I've lived in DUMBO for over 10 years. I think the open streets are a wonderful contribution to the neighborhood. The increase in tourists has been substantial, and even in the last year or two, there's been a big increase. And there's so much traffic now that so many people walking across the Brooklyn Bridge and then turning to walk down Washington that there's barely enough space on the sidewalk. And so I was wondering if anyone had considered extending the open street actually from Plymouth all the way up to York Street. That's question number one. And then the second question is, I really love the design of the new obstacles that Big did. And I was wondering if we could hear more specifically from Big about the work that they did on the design of the open streets.
So I'll do the first question first, and then I'll hand it over to Bid. And if anyone from Big is here, they can go into greater detail too. So right now, the only application that we have for Washington Street is the one between Front and Water from the Bid. If anyone did want to apply to extend the open street, we accept applications from both informal and formal entities, and you can apply at nyc.gov/openstreet.
I think so. I think Kai Uwe Berman is on from Big, who also happens to live on Washington Street. Kai, do you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. I've been listening to everybody's comments, and I truly appreciate the various perspectives on this. I wear 3 hats actually here. I reside on Washington Street, so actually the street that is being proposed and being discussed right here. We also have our office on Washington Street now. The entrance is 45 Main, but the back entrance is directly on Washington Street. We have about 200 people working here at Big. And then I also am representing the design team that put this proposal together. So I am also a father of 2 children. And I have to say what I truly appreciate about the Open Street program that has been ongoing and developing is its commitment to children. So it was actually very interesting to hear also a previous speaker on behalf of I think Cynthia on behalf of the school, the Dock Street School, and just stating that it's a much safer place for the children. So I will just sort of say that it is the Open Street program. It's not the closed street program. And if anything, it's really about sharing or a shared street where all of the needs in terms of access for logistics and dropping things off, providing an emergency lane within the design so that vehicles can actually maneuver through it, and then also providing those sort of safer spaces for people to congregate and to create community. So the design is literally creating zones. There are, of course, the 2 areas for seating that both the Gare and Sweet Greens have for their specific dining opportunities within the street. We also offer then those sort of clustered seating areas. The idea there is that they are extremely flexible and you can sort of really start to kind of rearrange or to maneuver them so that you can create a place for people to sit, congregate, enjoy their coffee or their kind of meal that they picked up at Peas and Pickles. There's also the addition of 4 trees. Don't underestimate actually the shading opportunities of these shading trees. There's more lights as well to create a more lit space in the evening hours. And then there is that sort of performance where all of the sort of artists and all the great programming that the BID puts together is also able to kind of have a little bit of a raised platform and celebrate the many creatives in the neighborhood and that come. So I think it's as a shared street idea where it's sharing both business needs, but also residents' needs of all ages, creating that safer connection, I think, between the sort of Brooklyn Bridge movement through the DUMBO neighborhood and down Washington to the park. And then also thinking about how to create sort of a flexible furnishing and to really sort of support both a more well-lit, a greener biophilic kind of space, and to create those sort of movable sort of furnishings that allow you to do different things. That's the idea behind the design.
Okay, thank you, Kai. Okay, next I see Mallory Kasdan.
Hi. Sorry, I have to make sure everyone's being quiet in my house. Hang on one second. Hi. My name's Mallory. I am one of the co-founders of the DUMBO Action Committee. We do a lot of work on behalf of residents in the neighborhood. Been here for almost 20 years, seen all the changes, like changes, appreciate changes. But I have to say, we have noticed, I've been doing this for a long time now, probably like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, advocating on behalf of residents, mostly for safety and for traffic help, and have worked alongside the BID and have enjoyed a really good relationship with the BID for the most part, with the exception of this thorny issue of open streets. One thing that I would love to say, just that I haven't really heard mentioned, which I don't believe we'll get an answer to because we've asked at a lot of these types of meetings, is how exactly is success measured? What kind of data that is measurable to create a successful open street? Because I keep hearing everyone talk about that. And I know this is an economic development, committee. And I understand that having great photos and PR on behalf of a community brings more people to that community. And I think, I take a lot of pride in living here and in the people that I know, and being, a person that knows a lot of people in the community because I've been here a long time and I'm vocal. But I don't really know if it's all true. It just seems kind of amorphous, a lot of this data and the specifics of what you guys are trying to say to defend this kind of really intense change in the way that we all live here. I know people work here. I know people visit here as a tourist, but we also live here. And as Suzanne said, it's a very large growing residential community. And a lot of us are active, and we want to be heard, and we want to be really heard. We want to be compromised with. And I don't feel that has been addressed. I think people go in other directions and they say, well, look at all the stuff we're doing. We do all this great stuff. We do all this great stuff. And then they say, well, it's actually not a problem. It's not a problem. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And I appreciate that the BID has answered some of our questions. They have committed to the sort of traffic ambassadors, I guess we're calling them. But at the end of the day, it just does seem like we don't have actual data. We don't have actual facts about why something is a success. The block on Washington Street where everyone's just saying, oh, the tourists will come, they'll come. Well, we need some enforcement. We actually needed enforcement 2 years ago or 3 years ago. We really need it this summer, because the DDZ project will not be complete. This summer will, again, be pretty much a nightmare because they're not going to be done with Front Street by May, June. And this is just the reality. I'm on all these meetings, all the DAC people, we're volunteers. We don't get paid. We just care. We really care about being safe and about being heard. And that has always been sort of the backbone of DAC. And that's what we'll continue to fight for. We fight for a better subway. We engage with all of our electeds. We're here on the community board. And I just think that all the other PR and all the other people that show up and say, I love this and I love tourists and it's so happy. That's great too. I love that too. And I don't want to be positioned that that's my feeling, but I just don't think that that's actually all the accurate thing we're asking, which is how is data being processed and how is this going to be okay for everyone in DUMBO? Thank you for listening.
Okay, Mallory, thank you. Okay, I'd like to once again mention, please keep your comments and questions to 2 minutes. We have other items on the agenda. So it's not just this, we have other discussions.
Could I could just answer the question in terms of what defines a success, if that's okay.
By all means, Kyle.
Great, thank you. So yeah, that's a great question. Success obviously means a lot of different things in a lot of different places all across the city. New York City is a city of neighborhoods, and each neighborhood is diverse in its own way. But in terms of success, obviously there's the sort of economic benefits report and the data analysis that I talked about in the presentation. That was all data that was pulled from tax receipts that businesses file with the state. as they do their taxes on a quarterly basis. So this is information that's pulled essentially directly from businesses across New York City. So there's those economic successes that could be evaluated. There's obviously, you know, the community feedback and then dialogue like we're having tonight and like we've been having. Obviously, there are a lot of, you know, different opinions on open streets and how it should exist or how it shouldn't exist. But, you know, at the end of the day, we do feel that there is a tremendous amount of support for open streets, not only on Washington Street, but through the entire program. It's a huge part of elected officials' platforms. It's a huge part of the mayor's platform. It's just becoming a sort of just everyday part of New York City now, moving forward with the permanent legislation. So there's the sort of community feedback type of you know, analysis that we do. There's also environmental impacts that we do. There's been studies that have been done related to noise, to air quality, to a number of other sort of different types of environmental indicators across the city. There's also, of course, the traffic impacts. You know, that's the bread and butter of the Department of Transportation. I already talked to you about the traffic study that is going to be done in the coming months. You know, success is also based in, you know, just conversations like I said we're having tonight. I mean, we've obviously heard a lot of people who have serious qualms with open streets, but we've also heard from people who tremendously love open streets and really love it and wanted to expand more. So I also want to underscore that, you know, a lot of people are saying that they're not being heard, but that's exactly why we're having these conversations tonight, is to go back and forth. And there's certain things that you all have highlighted that the bid has gone above and beyond to do. But one thing that we feel very strongly about is keeping the schedule 7 days a week.
Thank you, Kyle. Committee members, I do see your hands raised. What I'd like to do first is let the community finish their questions and comments, and then I'll go to the committee members after that. But I'd like to have this move along quickly as possible. Bill Stein. Please try to keep it to 2 minutes.
Yes, thanks. I'm Bill Stein. I'm a board member of the Fulton Ferry Landing Association, but tonight I'm speaking on behalf of myself. Just a few points. I just want to point out that this open street is one of 20 in Community Board 2, but it's the only one that is 7 days a week. Also, I think that it's a distraction from the real issue. It's a distraction to argue that the tourists will be here nonetheless, so we may as well have the open street. That's a distraction from the real issue, and the real issue is the traffic backups that this closed street causes, especially on Friday and Saturday nights, especially in the summer. The stretch of Water Street from the Manhattan Bridge to Old Fulton Street, when you're coming, a lot of rideshare cars are coming to the Empire stores, are coming and dropping people off at the Soho House, the members only Soho House restaurant. And so that's not, you know, the other argument being made is that do tourists drive? Do tourists not drive to the area? Can we stop tourists from driving? No, tourists aren't driving. International tourists aren't driving to Dumbo. Domestic tourists, for the most part, aren't driving. They're taking ride shares, and the ride shares are coming down Water Street. And so on summer nights, on the weekend, you have a backup, as others have said in the chat, that goes from Old Fulton Street all the way to Washington Street and beyond. And the reason is, if you're coming down Water Street, the first street, Washington Street, is closed to make a left turn. You go down further. Main Street is one way, the opposite direction. You go down further. Dock Street is one way, the opposite direction. You have to go past the River Cafe to all the way to Old Fulton Street. That drive on a summer weekend can take 15 to 20 minutes or more. And I have documented video that I can send the committee if they wish. And I can send it to the DOT as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Next, I see Jones Monez. Sorry, I mispronounced your name.
Yes, it's Jones Munoz. Hi, my name is David Jones Munoz. I am an owner of a business that's on Washington Street. I have a unique perspective because we're constantly there, almost 18 hours a day. We stand over, we look over the section that is in dispute. And like I said, I've been there 15 years. One of the things that I'm in favor of the street being closed as far as for pedestrians and visitors, for one of the reasons is safety. You cannot turn off the tourists like I keep on hearing. There's a large park there, what have you. You can't turn off the tourists like a tap. You can't say you're going to come in now or when you're going to come. They just keep coming. We watch it from all hours of the day. What I have noticed when the street is what I call open as far as cars are parked, there's a lot more road rage. There's people getting angry. The tension on the street of tourists being honked out of the way. I see it constantly. I've been in that situation where I've been driving through, coming to and from work. I park in a parking lot underneath my storefront because I know that's the easiest thing for me to do. But what I've noticed is the safety of the area. And I think what one of the other people said earlier, the joy in the air. I'm proud of being a strong member of DUMBO. As many people say, I'm a business owner, but I live there. I'm there constantly. About the emergency vehicle issue, we've been a part of this. We've seen an emergency vehicle there, maybe stuck in traffic like that was said earlier. And myself and my partner and staff have opened the dividers to let those emergency vehicles go through. Where when there's cars parked up and down that street, they can't get through. There's no way. There's got cars double parked in front of Sweet Greens. There's cars double parked further up. So those emergency vehicles can't get through in those periods that people are talking about where they're saying the street being, I get confused on the term, but when pedestrians are there predominantly, vehicles can get through actually much easier than when it's solely for parking.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Jones.
I have one quick question though, is about the police presence. Is that police presence going to be there during the full time of the 18 hours? Because I think enforcement, as Mallory said, is really important. The amount of enforcement of the trucks and everything. How long is that police presence going to be there? Thank you.
Sorry, happy to answer. So we are actually putting together our RFP for the traffic managers. It's not a police presence that we're able to hire, but we, these are folks who will help move people in and out and keep things flowing. We've been consulting with community members and we'll continue to do so through that RFP process. Probably they will be enlisted through the peak hours, so specifically over the weekends. We've also recently hired a new operations director who's kind of an additional eyes and ears on the street. So they'll be able to be very responsive, opening and closing barricades. And just to echo what, on the enforcement side, I think, everybody, 99% of what everybody in the community talks about, we're 100% in line with. And DUMBO has grown, I think like so many people want to be coming to DUMBO and want to be moving in, understanding, the crowds in the neighborhood, they're still moving here in droves. And there's definitely a need for everybody to come together and advocate for more of a more of an enforcement presence with the kind of traffic violations that go on in the neighborhood.
Thank you. See now who's next. Kyle, I take it you have no comments on that? Okay, perfect. Okay, next on the list. I see Richard Merrill, Richard
Yes, hi.
Laura.
I live right on the corner. I'm right, this is my block. If I put the computer outside, you'll see this is where they said, I lived on this corner for 50 years. I worked from this corner for 50 years. I enjoy so much the tourists. I can't even begin to tell you. It's the energy, the spontaneity, again, the joy. It's transformed the street completely. Before we had the closed street, I want to remind some of the residents here that we had streets filled with vendors right up the block from all the way down in Plymouth. The closed street, that was a closed, I have photos of it, one vendor right after the other, 10 or 12 of them lined up there. We fought really hard to get rid of them. The closed street really helped a great deal because we have more patrolling now. We still have some problems here down in front of my building, 31, which is the corner, which is not part of it. I would like to see, like the other one, the gentleman said, I'd like to see the whole street right up to Prospect made into an open street. But another thing, we got to get away from this automobile thing. Yes, there are traffic jams, and I can see them. I can sit on my fire escape and look at the trail of red lights all the way down to Front Street. But these are people coming here, not tourists. Tourists take the subway. These are people driving here. For some stupid reason, they think they're going to find an easy place to park, and they wind up driving nowhere. So that's something we have to battle. We have to start greening up the city, and one way to do it is to have these open streets. And the Washington open street is fantastic. So thank you.
Thank you. Rob, I see your name up next. Please keep your comments and questions to 2 minutes, please.
Sure. Brief comment followed by a question for Kyle. One thing I get the impression of from listening, like I think Jimmy's distinction is really great about how there's sort of 3 different factions here: business, tourists, and then residents. I think that a lot of the response that I hear is the residents feel repeatedly pressured to sort of be the sacrificial lamb to a tourist district as it increasingly shifts that way. And what I'd like to invite is the opportunity for the bid and for the DOT to listen more to the residents and try to negotiate with them in a way. Like here we all are saying, a lot of us are saying less than 7 days a week, fewer than 7 days a week. And Kyle, we don't have a traffic study yet completed for this area. And you seem already very, very committed to it. And Kasia, before she left, said the York Street station's right there. Well, the DUMBO Action Committee tried really hard to get people to listen to fixing the York Street station, and the MTA ran over them. So I'd like to invite more like interagency cooperation for the DOT to try to flex its muscle. Who do they know at the MTA? Alexandria, it's like you guys are able to respectfully, like you're able to kind of go over the wishes of a lot of DUMBO residents. I'd love to see you use that same power ability to try to incorporate some other things, like get the tour buses out of DUMBO, get the non-residential traffic out of DUMBO, and use that muscle to do that. And to that point, Kyle, Willoughby Streets, the open street on Willoughby, recently did undergo some really big changes based on community feedback. And I would love to know specifically, as the chairs asked you, like, what can we do? And you said, well, we'll factor in a letter. What does DOT actually need from residents to actually affect incorporating really our feedback like we're asking for tonight? Because respectfully, like just talking about it during one meeting and then having it all thrown out the window is not what we're looking for. We do want to negotiate. We're not saying no open streets, but I think a lot of people feel really unheard. So what would we need to do with DOT to be heard and to make those changes like on Willoughby?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me first off start by saying that you have been heard, as is the case why I'm here tonight, and as is the case with a number of the changes that the bid has agreed to implement in order to sort of improve upon some of the suggestions that you had made. So I don't want the characterization of the relationship between us and the residents, and let me be clear, there's a lot of residents who are very pro everything with open streets, as we had just heard, versus maybe the perspective that you bring to the table. So, we've made a number of changes that you've asked for, and I think that they're great suggestions and improvements to incorporate on. There's just certain things that we just don't want to budge on because we feel like it's in the best interest of our streets and the sort of wider sort of public, which is a lot of different, obviously, stakeholders that represent the public. But if, the committee here or the transportation committee even decided to issue a resolution asking the DOT to make any modification, that is the best way to do it, is through the resolution letter to the community board.
Would you be open to a modification, including things like having DOT ban tourist bus from the district?
I'm not the best person to advise on those particular issues, but you can definitely include anything and everything as a suggestion in his letters.
Thank you, Rob. Okay, next I see E. Thomas.
Hi, thank you. I'll try to be as quick as possible, knowing that we've been sitting here for so long. It is really frustrating and demoralizing to hear you say that you're not going to budge on certain issues when we brought up things that are very relevant to this conversation, going from a weekend to 7 days a week to 12 hours. Like what necessitates such a leap, if you will? And how are you going to take feedback that is not anti-tourist, it's not anything other than wanting to be heard, into account, especially when you just opened it up saying we're not going to budge on certain things, but there's no justification for these changes to have come across. We've never heard data. None of that has ever happened. And it's really frustrating then to hear that you're going to do a transportation study, but before that, we're going to implement all these changes. Like I don't understand the logic there. It just seems like a blanket statement that, again, does not take into account a lot of residents and their concerns. And if you're telling us now that showing up at this meeting to voice those concerns really had no impact on you, that we need to write a letter, where should we write this letter? And are you going to be accountable for that so that these voices are heard? So we're not spending our Tuesday night in vain. It's so frustrating. And that's been, Kyle, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but you just told me that you weren't going to budge about certain things. And I'm talking very specifically about DUMBO in our neighborhood, which is very unique to us. I've lived here for a dozen or so years. It's not what was happening in New York City and what is happening in different neighborhoods is different for them. We're very much interested in what is happening in our streets. And if you've spent time here, you know that all of the closing of the streets has become, it's a nightmare here with construction, et cetera. There's just a lot that comes into play that I don't necessarily think is being taken into account.
Totally understand. The open street really was 7 days a week last year, so that's not necessarily a change. But I'll just reiterate the point that I made to the previous speaker, that there were a number of asks that you've made, and we've honestly addressed a lot of them. There are certain things that we can do, and there's certain things that we just decide not to do. So if you, or if the board feels, it's up to the board to decide what they want advanced to the DOT. That's not for me to decide. So if it is the wish of the board to include any number of modifications, suggestions, improvements, so be it. And we'll take those into consideration.
Thank you, Kyle. Craig? You're muted, Craig.
Cam, that's you.
Craig Anthony?
Yes, I'm so
Yes,
sorry about
please.
that. I'm so used to being called Cam that I don't even know my own name anymore. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I just started my timer, so I'll make sure I'm under 2 minutes. So one of the things that, I'm not gonna sit here for too long and say how much I love this neighborhood. I've been in this neighborhood since 2003. And I knew from the DUMBO Arts Festival what was going to become of the neighborhood and how it was going to grow. And, last year was my first year of taking a business that I started in 2013, specifically to Washington Street. And it was a big, the closure of the block or the open street, whatever you want to call it, was a big help to what we was doing and raising money and promoting emerging artists and raising money for the schools in the neighborhood. But, it's 1 minute, yes. Okay, so, I know there are the talk about like whether we should close the streets more or what we're doing. I do like the fact that there's a design in place to allow emergency vehicles through or to allow traffic to come through. And I do love the fact that, there are going to be traffic agents. And I think that's the key. So maybe there's some middle ground there where, not only are there traffic agents, but, I had this conversation earlier this week. The one thing that falls dear to my heart is elderly people and people with disabilities. So, somebody was talking about somebody like was having an emergency. She was worried about getting to the place in time to save a life if possible. So, and I do want to just give some type of like maybe suggestion, maybe that might help or a possible solution. But in addition to the traffic agents and, allow emergency vehicles in, is there a way to give people that qualify some type of license or placard or not that goes on their vehicle, but they have in their wallet that the traffic agents say, okay, you're allowed down this block or you're not, this is an emergency. Let's stop the traffic. Let's open up the streets. Let's get these people through. I think that is just a suggestion. That might be a crazy suggestion. You could, view it how you want, but I just think it's an offer of one possible small solution that can help with people that are concerned about the elderly and the disabled getting in. But overall, I am all for the what's happening in the development, and I'm hoping that there is a solution that we all can live with, and everybody can be happy at the end of the day. The open streets have been a blessing to so many people in the community. And, at the same time, I'm not tone deaf. I do understand people's concerned. And thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So we're gonna just continue. Any more hands being raised? It's gonna be Lindsay, Mark, and then Tara. And then after that, we'll go back to the committee. Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. I am a resident of DUMBO. I'm also a business owner. I've been living in the neighborhood for about 13 or 14 years. I just want to start off by saying how much respect I have for all my other community members and neighbors on this call. I have close friends on the DUMBO Action Committee and that I care for a lot. But I do want to say that the purpose of this call, I believe, was from an economic standpoint. So I did want to raise my hand to just say that as a business owner in the community, oftentimes tourists are my only sales for the day. Today, for instance, my only sales were, I had someone from Australia, someone from Netherlands, and I had a bunch of people from North Carolina. None of them were New York.
Okay.
Hello?
Mark, yes,
Did we lose her?
we lost her. Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like we lost her.
Yeah, she just dropped off.
Oh, shoot.
Okay, she comes back. I'll give her an opportunity, but Mark?
Yes. My name is Mark Caserta. I'm the Vice President of Small Business Support for the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce. I just wanted to give our support for the open street. And I think as the last speaker was mentioning, the economic impacts, I think Kyle alluded to it at the beginning, the DOT did a study on the economic impacts of open streets, and they were quite substantial. And I actually ran an open street for a number of years. I was the executive director of the Park Slope 5th Avenue bid. We were one of the first open streets in the city, and the businesses did quite well with open streets and are there partially because of open streets. So also the chamber is very much involved in tourism. There were 58 million tourists in New York City last year. They're expecting like 61 to 65 million this coming year. So if you like the crowds, get used to it. They're going to be bigger this coming year, which may speak to the need for the open street. And there are obvious issues. When I was running the open street there, obviously the community had input. We had to try to figure things out. It sounds like the Dumbo bid is doing that and the community board is doing that. So I hopefully we'll be able to work it out. I don't want to, take too much time because we're all been here and I haven't eaten. So thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I prepared in advance. Okay, last speaker, community is Tara.
Hi, I'm Tara. Hopefully Lindsay will be back soon. She's a dear friend of mine. I just wanted to thank everyone. I know it's been a long call. I particularly wanted to thank Denise. I have a lot of friends in Farragut that I've worked with for years, particularly in stuff with the police department. And I appreciated what you said. Listen, I'm for open streets too. What I'm not for is in Kings County in 2022, it seems like whoever funds the developers and vice versa, and that includes politicians, gets to do whatever they want without resident input. And so, as a resident here for 17 years, several of us started a petition last summer that over 200 people signed, and we're just asking for a bit of communication. I have several friends that have small businesses in Dumbo. They're women. I support them. I love them. But I really feel like at every turn, we're just disregarded. And particularly for DOT to come on here and say it's a done deal, I'd like to know what's the garbage pickup schedule. I'd like to know what's going on with the food trucks that for like 9 years, many of us have been trying to get them off the streets. I feel like we've been on a hamster wheel here for 8 years, and I don't feel that our voice is heard. And I very much appreciate everyone on this call. I support my friends that are business owners here, but I just would like a little bit more communication. And I think our first speaker seems to be doing a great job up on Atlantic Avenue of really listening to everybody. So I hope we could maybe learn from her, and I hope everyone has a great spring.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to let the community know the community board, this particular committee has heard you, but I would like to also remind you that the streets has been approved. Okay, so we're looking for comments about that going forward. Okay, so with that in mind, okay, Ms. Gilman, I see your hand raised.
Hey, everybody. Just starting off the committee discussion here. I think from my seat, and the committee members can jump in, it seems like we've gotten a ton of feedback from residents that they feel railroaded here, and it's really the job of our committee to be good gatekeepers in this process, regardless of the bigger picture of open streets. And I think considering the uniqueness of Dumbo as neighborhood, considering the kind of volume of concern that we've heard, and weighing that right alongside how large of a task open streets and DOT has in trying to do this kind of lift and change in neighborhoods. Weighing that all together, I would propose a motion that we send a letter to DOT as a board committee that says we've heard kind of loud and clear from multiple parties here, and it seems that further discussion is really not just desired but required, and that we expect that to continue, whether it's between DAC and the bid and DOT and our committee, or whether that's happening separately. We can kind of figure that out. But I think it's not our job to cherry pick which of the kind of items should be factored in here. We're not the experts. Certainly it makes sense that big coach buses shouldn't be in the area. It seems to make a lot of sense to talk about reduced hours or days if this is really an outlier in having a total closure. But I can't pretend I know all the answers here. I don't live in Dumbo. So I think as a committee member, I would propose that we kind of flag this as a conversation that really has some work left to do in the bigger, even if we end up in a similar place, just speaking even directly, Kyle, to you, I really appreciate all the work you're doing. Even if this, because when everyone comes to the table, if things end up in the same place because everyone actually got there and understands kind of the larger vision, and we can see traffic pattern studies and people feel informed, it's going to be a totally different buy-in from the community. And this demo community is different than any other. So I think regardless of who's right and wrong on a particular issue, and I'm sure you all know a lot more than I do, I think it's easy to hear there's a little bit more room to go on this for the community to feel heard as residents, in addition to the economic benefit. So I'll leave it to getting a second and to hear what you guys have to say on committee.
I'll second that.
Okay. Kate, could you do me a favor, please? Could you be a little more concise with that motion?
I know.
Okay,
I'm like trying to condense everyone's thoughts here. Okay. Kate, Denise, feel free to jump in if you want to make an amendment to this motion. I'm not wed to it. But my motion would be Community Board 2 Economic Development Committee sends a letter to DOT regarding the specific Washington Dumbo open street, that after having heard from resident, store owner, DOT, and BID and DAC feedback, there is further conversation needed so that residents of Dumbo are heard and their concerns are addressed. And that includes flexibility on hours and days of operation. So really coming to the table in what feels like an open way. And how much more concise can I be, Bill? Denise and Kate, do you want to get in there?
No, I think to shorten it just a little bit, I think you can drop off right at the end where you said, that it would include their concerns, the community concerns, the residents' concerns, and to include the hours, the days of 7 days a week. Period.
Yes, what I've heard is that the residents would probably like weekdays, hours reduced.
And I think they would like to see more data, data from DOT on this. I'm sure that's true for all open streets, Cal. But Kate, what are you thinking?
I'd like to provide a little different perspective. Like, we heard from many residents who were very much in favor of the open street and also expanding it to further blocks. I'm not saying that should be done. I totally agree on further discussion. Denise rightfully pointed out Farragut houses. Dock Street School came and spoke and talked about how important the open street was to them. Business owners, all the stakeholders need to be at the table, not just
totally
in the conversation, not just one group. Frankly, with one perspective, I was actually personally surprised at how many positive perspectives there were. I personally like the open street as someone who used to work in that area, and I spent a lot of afternoons having a lunch there. And I'm local. I don't live in Dumbo, but I live 15 minutes away by walking. I don't drive there. So I just want to be clear that if there's a further discussion, that there should be a strong effort to include all the perspectives we heard today.
Agree. I totally agree. I think it's not for us to decide. It's like, the last thing I want to do is say someone's right and someone's wrong here, because I think everyone's bringing really valid stuff. It's just thinking with the idea that it's our job to push this forward and to say it's not done. I think you're totally right there. It's not for us to say what the solution is, but for us to say the conversation has to continue between everyone.
And I just think I would also I don't know if maybe Taya is the best person to facilitate, but how do we get the proper outreach? Because I think to some people's points, not everyone has easy access to internet. If there's been email newsletters, that might not be reaching all the constituents. I think we need a little more creative ways to really get all the perspectives. And I think this happened with Willoughby as well, which is a very controversial open street. But the reality is there are a lot of people in favor of it. There are many loud voices in favor, there are many loud voices against. I think every community is unique. And
there was a compromise for Willoughby.
There should be I think it's
there should be a compromise here as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that there's
community decide.
Exactly.
That compromise. Everything is a compromise. So I'm sorry, Mr. Flournoy. So you want the answer to your question, Miss Gilman? Is what's that motion again?
So I think for us, to not try to do to get too far in the weeds. Really, what we're saying is letter to DOT. Kyle's view to say we'd like a further conversation between DOT and the groups on the ground. All stakeholders,
all the stakeholders
in Dumbo, so that this doesn't go the way of Willoughby, where we've heard, you know, if it doesn't get talked about now, it's going to come knocking all the way down the line. And we might as well get our hands dirty and get everyone.
Right, but
in
let's get the motion in
conversation.
first.
Yeah.
Let's get the motion. So that's the
Yeah,
motion.
so
All the
yeah,
stakeholders.
letter to DOT saying all the stakeholders have to be in further you know, we'd like all the stakeholders to be in further conversation, that it's clear that, you know, more of that is needed on Washington Open Street.
No, yeah, okay. Got it?
Okay, okay. Question, what will the discussion about? Will discussion be about weekday hours? Will it be about weekend hours? What's the
Weekday,
discussion?
weekend, yes. Weekday, weekend. That seems to be a big deal issue that I keep hearing, you know, as well as some of the other stuff, but you know, it's if you.
Yeah, I think the discussion regarding hours.
I mean, that's a big one. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's regarding hours and potentially, I think there's a larger conversation Rob had mentioned about the bigger picture in DUMBO, that if we're talking about a bird's eye view of traffic and things like that, that this community has a lot to say. So it can start with hours, but I think the bigger DOT. Yeah.
And other considerations and other considerations.
Yeah.
I have to say, if I can just add to it, I was a little, you know, found it a little interesting, the idea that, and I found it interesting because all along through this conversation, it almost seemed as though it was already done and there's no walking back. And then of course, it was then said that basically it's sounded like it's a done deal no matter what anybody says at this point. And I don't think that that's fair to the community, and we are a community board. And so we are supposed to listen to everybody and hope that we can come to the middle and make everybody, you know, happy, or at least satisfied, commonly satisfied, because everyone would have gotten the opportunity to speak, and then you come through the middle. You know, the best, when something is being introduced, the best way to introduce it is to include everybody and to be able to say, here's what it is, this is what it will do, this is how it can make a difference in everybody's lives, and then we'll be happily ever after. But it seems that there's some of those elements that were missed maybe. And so we want to just rein it in because we are supporting and we're also advocating. That's why we are the community board. Board.
Alexandria, what are the hours for businesses during the week?
What are the hours for the businesses during the week?
Yes, generally speaking.
Sure. So for example, the Gare is going to be open until, you know, midnight. I can't speak
during the week, not the weekend, during the week.
During those hours as well. I mean, they're like a fully functioning, very popular restaurant. The Peas and Pickles is 24/7. I believe Sweet Green, maybe somebody identified it as 8 o'clock. That might be accurate. And Joe Coffee, I believe, is around 8 o'clock as well.
Okay. Now the comment period ends in 45 days, so we cannot have this come back to the committee. So the committee has to make a recommendation tonight. So based on what I'm hearing from everyone here, we would like to have all of the individual stakeholders, DOT, okay, the bid get together for a conversation be specifically to look at the weekend hours and the weekday hours to be reduced to a time that is workable to the residents and to the business owners. Would you be willing to accept that, Kate, as a position for us to take?
Yeah, I think the crux of it is hours. It's really the scale of this being really a dramatically different than other open streets that we've come across. I think that's the biggest thing that folks are talking about. I think we could also ask for alternatives in the form of if DOT is really changing traffic patterns, we're not just talking about this year, but open streets are really doing that in the last couple years. Things like releasing data on the traffic study that they do so the community can see what they see, not allowing tourist buses. I think I don't know that I want to limit that conversation to just talking about hours. I think there's more to say about this if we're trying to help Dumbo with the kind of congestion they're dealing with around this open street. But I'm open to the amendment. I just want to flag that the issue is bigger than ours for the people we've heard from.
Yeah.
But I can accept that, Bill. We can have that be the motion and just say hours need to be, compromised on and discussed.
Chair Flanoy.
Yes, by all means, Taya.
Hi, everybody. This has been an amazing discussion. And if you've been paying attention, there have been some really specific asks placed on the table. I think Ms. Gilman, Ms. Yearwood-Young, Ms. Peterson have all been listening really carefully. I just want to remind you that the committee's job tonight, this is the discussion, right? This is the discussion. So the committee's task tonight is to use all of your intelligence and all of your good listening to hear what the community has said to you and to state that explicitly as the board's memo of position on what the DOT is proposing, right? So by asking for the DOT to have a discussion, you're sort of kicking the can down the road a bit and repeating what has happened tonight, right? So if I could make a recommendation, it would be for you to do that hard, brave work of taking everything you've heard tonight and make some specific asks.
Mr. Chairman, can I have a word?
This is the discussion. Yes, by all means, Sarah.
I was listening to the conversation. I agree with Ms. Gilman and of course, and what she was trying to discuss and what we would do as a committee. I absolutely agree with Taya. If we're going to say something and do something, let's not beat around the bush and let us make a decision. We heard from 2 sides or 3 sides of the community. There are some who are very much in favor of open streets and will accept the hours and the days. There are others who are in favor, but also would like to see some change in the hours and days. So I would say as a committee, if we're going to do our job, what we are discussing is we're just telling the DOT to discuss and listen again. We've heard what the DOT does when they're here and listen. If we are going to do our job, as Taya said, let us make a decision. Listening to the community, we've listened to the community, and now we will say what we think the community is saying. And if that's what it is, let's go ahead and all of us discuss it properly. Too much going on, too much conversation going on. What if? And I was getting confused. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Cyril, do you have a recommendation that you would give to Kate as far as the exact hours that we think the open street should be open for?
We might have just lost Cyril. Hopefully he pops back up. I think that yes, okay. So since I think we're in the water now anyway, Taya, it's a great call in. I think we obviously hesitate as a committee to speak for people who kind of are representing their own interests. And usually it is that gatekeeping. Since we don't have time before the next meeting, I think that's the perfect call out. So yes, let's get in it. I would say just in discussion, not in a formal motion, that we propose to reduce the hours on the weekdays. It seems like weekdays versus weekends are the big pinch, but I'm open to feedback on that. Residents can feel free to use the chat on here so we can also see kind of your call in as well. I think we want to see things that were like missing in the Willoughby open street, clear signage and matters that became a big issue on what kind of closure it is, when it is. I think if we work as committee to just knock this around a little bit, we can come up with our list.
I'll suggest, I think there was some frustration that it was extended by an hour rather than reduced or remaining the same. I think like taking back that hour, at least on weekdays, is a reasonable place to start as a, and one other thing I think might be helpful is maybe we can commit to, or maybe we can ask DOT and the DUMBO bid to commit to, you know, after 2 or 3 months of, you know, the current plan, will you agree now to come back together with the community, all the stakeholders in the community to, I guess, reassess how it worked and just retest it? Because I think this has been a fast moving process, and the conversation does sound like there's just some lingering frustration over many different issues in DUMBO, and we've heard a lot about them in the community board, and also how open streets was sort of originally rolled out with very little community input. So I think having that sort of stake in the ground would be like a requirement to sort of come back to the table. I would be, you know, happy to have that if I were, you know, had concerns.
So you're saying instead of having extended 1 hour in both directions, both before and after, you're suggesting that they not increase the hours? And thank you very much, Taya, for putting this up. I appreciate that. What we're looking at right now is some of the other open streets that are currently in the process being worked. And you're seeing that, for instance, in some cases, Monday through Friday, you're looking at 7:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. In other cases, you're looking at 8 to 7. We need to suggest a timeline that we suggest that that the open streets end.
I thought it was 10 to 9 for this one, and I guess I'm saying during the week, could we go to 10 to 8? It seemed like most of the businesses closed at 8.
I'm talking about during the weekdays, not the weekends.
That's what I said. Yeah. During the weekdays, many of the businesses are closed by 8. And Mr. Jones-Munoz said a lot of businesses are 9 to 7. Am I missing the hours? I thought this specific one, oh, it's 10 to 10. So I would say then I guess 10 to 8 or 9 on the weekdays. I personally wouldn't suggest a change on the weekends, but it's open for other people's viewpoint, or at least not on Friday and Saturday.
I wouldn't suggest a change on weekends, but I would suggest a change on weekdays. 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. is a long term. You have individuals who are coming home and having open streets at 10 p.m. might be problematic.
Yeah, I think that's a fair, you know, move in the direction of some concerns.
8 is probably perhaps a digestible time.
Yeah.
Since, you know, the businesses are still benefiting, and, you know,
yes,
you want to include them in that thought. And so if they close, you know, basically at 8, then that could perhaps be a negotiable point.
Okay, so you're saying basically from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, weekends the same time?
I would say maybe Sunday through Thursday. I think Friday should be late for sure.
That would be on par with SLA guidelines. Mr. Flona, I just wanted to say that Maisha Morales has her hand up. You probably can't see her.
Yeah, I saw that. Ms. Morales?
Yes, I just also wanted to highlight that from what I've heard, people aren't also just talking about the hours per se, but also the amount of time. Like some don't believe it should be 7 days a week. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if DOT or anyone still from DUMBO, has there a study been done about the traffic, like on a Wednesday in the middle of the week? Like, is it even necessary to be open? at all, if that. And so I just wanted for us to hear.
The
So
7 days a week has already been approved.
Mr. Flanoy, I didn't hear you.
The 7 days a week has already been approved.
Okay.
But I thought the DUMBO organization, was their initial thought was to only ask, is the DUMBO organization asking for only weekends? Is that what was said earlier?
I don't recall that, no.
Yes, that's correct. So then, if they said only weekends, then so what is what would be the middle ground that they can then accept? Is it then, 2 days during the week only, and then on the weekends, like what, is there any middle, is it middle there? Or
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought you said the DUMBO bid, not the DUMBO Action Committee. The
no,
DUMBO Action
I said the
Committee.
DUMBO organization is what I said, yeah.
Okay, the DUMBO Action Committee asked for just weekends. The DUMBO bid did not.
No, I didn't say the DUMBO bid. I said the DUMBO organization. I was saying, did they ask for, or didn't they ask for weekends only?
Yeah.
So not the bid. I didn't
Yeah.
speak to that.
Yeah, the DUMBO Action Committee asked for weekends only. The actual, it's already been approved for 7 days a week, so that's not going to change.
I'm getting, it's already been approved by whom? Like, we need to talk what it is. Like, what has been approved already? That it would be 7 days, and who is that it has already been approved for 7 days?
So the chart that you're looking at describes the February 27th notices that were sent by the DOT to the district office. So what you're seeing is what has been approved by the DOT, and the committee tonight is trying to form a formal opinion during this 45-day public comment period. What you are looking at is what has been approved by the DOT. What you have heard from all of the attendees tonight is all of their suggestions, ideas, complaints, requests for how to change what has been approved.
Okay, so how did that, if I can ask, and maybe it was said already, or maybe whatever, I'm just trying to be clear in my mind. That approval by DOT, who was a part of the conversation that led to that it ended up with an approval? Or who was able to be, who wasn't? What can you give me the particulars? Give everyone the particulars.
Denise, that's an important question. Ms. Peterson, that's an important question, because I think I understand that there's confusion in the community because different city agencies have different approval processes, right? For example, the most common approval process that board residents are familiar with is the state liquor authority licenses, right? That relationship, the community board's relationship with the state liquor authority, is written into the city charter. So there's a law that says that they have a relationship with us. There is no similar law. Community boards do not have a city charter mandated role in the review or approval of DOT open streets.
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt. That's not true.
Okay.
Actually, per the legislation that was passed in 2021, there is a certain amount of notification and feedback period that we have to give. Legally, we are actually only required to do 30 days. Based on some of the ways that things played out last year and a request that specifically came from CB2, we extended that to 45 days, but we are only legally required to do 30 days.
Thank you for that clarification, Kyle. And just to be clear, but this part is correct, that the public comment period happens after a location has already been approved by the DOT, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the DOT went to DUMBO and said, this is great, this is what I'm submitting as an approval. There was no conversation other than the people who work at DOT that, okay, identified this is what it is, this is what me and whoever else is at the conference room table at DOT says. They hit the rubber stamp on that and they said, this is what we'll approve. Is that Is that correct?
It's,
Or no?
I don't necessarily know if I would characterize it in that same way. I mean, we do a lot of internal operational discussions. We also talk with a number of our other agency partners, NYPD, the fire department, MTA, DSNY, DEP, Mayor's Office of Media Entertainment, the list goes on and on. We also, as has been said in the chat, you know, we have received a number of inquiries, letters, meetings that we've held in the past with different stakeholders. And I want to sort of just reiterate a point that I've made a number of times tonight. We have addressed a number of the concerns and suggestions that have been made. There are certain things that we as the DOT wanted to advance, as is the case with the 7-day-a-week schedule. But like I said, we are open to the feedback that will be eventually shared in the letter tonight.
Yeah, and I think what's important about, for at least for me, with, you know, understanding that, and I think it should be for everyone else, because sometimes we miss or we're not informed as to exactly what the process is in terms of those steps that you go from A, you identify something, you go to B, you have a conversation with different agencies, you go to C, because I think that's a good education for everybody. And at what point, after all of that and all of those persons who's involved in that, that I guess when it comes back from NYPD, when it comes back from, this is what we identify from the other agencies, that then it comes to be, it's all good, everyone else, with everyone else being involved. And so we're gonna approve it. Is that kind of like basically how it goes? I'm Kyle. And then it starts coming out for public input. Or you want to deliver it in hopes that, you know, it works well for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you know, we're legislated to create an open streets program. There's also a streets plan that's been created for the city that, you know, requires us to create hundreds of thousands of square feet of space for pedestrians, as well as a number of new bike lanes. So these are sort of mandates that we are following per the elected representative that you all vote for, and that we are obliged to follow.
So all of our elected representatives, would you say, that's within CB2, say, council member Crystal Hudson on this side of CB2 and others, whoever they are. So they've all been so advised as to the plan and as to the approval based on what was put together. So they had no comment about it, meaning they may have had a comment, but I'm saying, but it traveled on the road where we are now.
Correct. I mean, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the elected officials. I believe some of the representatives are here tonight, but there were no sort of hiccups, I guess you could say, along that road that led us to this place.
Denise, where we are right now is, this is now, the 7 days are now approved. Okay, we have the ability to comment on any type of changes we would suggest that would be applicable to this application.
I got
you. And that's what we're discussing right now. It's a 7 days a week. We can suggest on time and other items, but it's 7 days a week.
Mr. Chair, we need to make a motion because it's at least get specific now.
We already have a motion. It's been
Okay.
seconded, and we just need clarification on it. We're having a discussion about that motion. Okay, and what we're looking to do basically is have a definitive motion where we're making a decision by the committee on what we suggest should be the letter of recommendation to DOT. So right now we need to just be specific about the time. So far we had a suggestion, which was basically closing the streets at 8 o'clock and not extending it an hour before or after that has already been set up previously.
Well, I guess since I went there, I'll make a friendly amendment, Kate, to reducing, the suggestion would be giving community feedback to reduce the hours on Sunday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. from 10 to 10. I guess that's the suggestion that I'm making. No change on Fridays or Saturdays. And to have a community discussion in after 3 months of the current structure.
They acceptable to you, Kate? Ms. Gilman, is that acceptable? I think we just lost her.
Oh.
We just lost Ms. Gilman.
Hey, I'm here.
Oh, there you
Sorry,
go.
my phone keeps popping out. That's a great friendly amendment. I think my only feedback, Kate, is do we want to limit the days that much, or do we want to just say across the board, really every weekday gets a reduction in hours proposal?
I mean, Sunday through
Just-
Thursday, I guess, but
Yeah.
I mean, maybe if we're calling that weekdays.
So you're saying Sunday through Thursday, reduced hours, no impact on the weekends. And then given the fact that they're saying they'll revisit this once it's operational, does it make sense to carve out summer as seasonal? Like given the location and tourism and everything else we know? I think what I'm hearing from residents in our earlier discussion and then in the chat is like, listen, our daily lives occur, in the morning and after work. And if we can crunch these hours so it's a later start and an earlier finish in whatever fashion, it's going to make their lives easier.
I think, yeah, I mean, I hear that. And I do think the reality of that particular block is that it's just kind of like a lot of people have said, it's a 24/7 tourist spot. And I'm not saying, let coach buses go up and down there, but I don't know that that'll change. I mean, that was before open streets and as many have stated. And so, and 10 to 8, yeah, I don't know, maybe outside the summer could be different. I mean, there are definitely gonna be people there way past 8 and tourists there, like taking photos in the summer. But I hear the residents, I mean, I'm open to another idea. That was like what I was throwing out there. It seemed reasonable. It seemed in line with the business hours and it gives some relief on the weekdays. That was
can also
be
in line with parking too, if we want to call it 7. Like if we want to go by street meter and mirror that, I've seen that done in open streets, but I think that's probably my only feedback. I'm also comfortable with the amendment, Kate.
Yeah, I think the amendment that you made, which was Sunday through Thursday, 8 o'clock, and Saturday, Sunday, 10 o'clock. And they can revisit this next year. Okay, after everything's done, they can do a postmortem. Okay, but let's keep it at that for right now. Do you agree with that, Kate?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, look, there's people who are commenting now who don't want any change, and there's people who that probably doesn't go far enough. Hopefully there's some feeling that we're trying to take into account everybody's comments.
Yes, and if you've ever been down in DUMBO, you'll see that the tourists are out there irregardless.
Yeah, I used to work right there, and it's a mob scene regardless of the open street. So,
and the fact that they will have an individual making sure that the traffic is basically clear for the cars to go through, I think that'd be a good plus also.
And I think I think that's, sorry to extend this any longer. I know we're way beyond anyway. I just want us to get this right. My only other piece is also examining days. So we're asking for reduced hours 10 to 8 on those days, Sunday through Thursday. I think it's a reasonable question to ask whether Monday to Friday, all those days, operate as open street or not. I think that's also been clearly asked by the residents, that this not be 7 days a week and not just a reduced hours ask. So given traffic patterns, given everything DOT and DAC and the bid know, like what day is best to pull off of that weekly schedule of open streets, so that residents feel met, and is the biggest pain, whether that's a Monday or whatever, I'm not sure. But I think we need to make sure to say days and hours.
Okay, so you're basically suggesting that our
a reduction day of the week,
reduction of time, okay, and then an offer for them to between the communities, the bid and DOT to look at other options as far as other days of the week.
Yeah, I think if we're trying to condense this now, where that leaves us is a letter to DOT recommending a reduction in hours Sunday to Thursday, 10 to 8, with an additional recommendation that it be less than 7 days a week, in conversation with these community groups who know, and DOT who knows kind of traffic patterns best. But I think we do need to push back up against 7 days a week being a given here. And given everything we've heard, it's a really reasonable request to say a DOT needs to meet in the middle, both on hours and on days. Whichever day makes sense. But that's my amendment. You guys can feel free to accept or not.
Okay, let's go with that. Kyle, can I ask you, make a suggestion to you? Is it possible we come back and revisit this later on this year?
Yeah, I'd be happy to come back in June, if that would work for this committee.
That worked perfectly. Thank you very much, Kyle. Okay, so.
I'm sorry, thank you so much for having me tonight. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to continuing the conversation. I know it's been a late night. I need to go eat dinner. So thank you again for having me, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Okay, so we have a motion. It's been seconded. Okay, I think it's been clarified. Let's put it to a vote. Okay.
What exactly is it? I'm actually not totally clear. Are we just saying in terms of the number of days of the week? Because like I personally am not totally in agreement on that. Like I think it was 7 days last year. I understand the community wants changes, but like maybe the hours change is enough for now and then revisit in June. Again, I think the activity on the street is 7 days in terms of visiting, but is it just to change? Is the motion to change it now or to revisit that?
The motion is to basically have the hours reduced and allow the community to discuss whether or not they want to talk to DOT about reducing possible days. So the ask from us is to reduce the hours during the week. Okay. The suggestion is that the community and DOT look at the possibility of reducing days. Okay, the 7 days have been approved. We can't do anything about that, but we can suggest that they actually talk about it. And then in June, DOT will come back to discuss it with us.
Okay, great. That's clear. Thank you.
Okay, let's put this to a vote. Okay. Let's see now. Kate, do you want to go through the roll so we know who's who?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
Yeah, I don't know who's still here.
Ms. Gilman, I can do that for you. Ms. Peterson, how do you vote? Ms. Peterson?
Yay.
Morales?
Yes.
Gilman?
Yes.
Mosso?
Yes.
Staton? Ms. Staton, are you with us still? Celeste Staton? Yearwood Young?
Yes.
Scala?
No.
And Flanoy?
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. And Ms. Staton is not present. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have one more presentation. Okay. The presentation is by Ridgewood Savings Bank, and that's the Banking Development District.
Good evening,
Okay,
everyone. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. No, I wasn't sure who was going to lead. By all means, please.
I'm here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Marshall. Back in 2016, I came in front of the board and I had asked permission to please allow us into the community of Community Board 2, Clinton Hill, to open up our branch and become a BDD branch under the Business Development District. And we were approved, and we currently are on Eastern Parkway to Myrtle and Underhill. Tonight, I asked that we expand it to the North Portland DCAB between Atlantic and DCAB, excuse me. and also on Bedford and Crown Street. And I'm asking for that extension because what I've been doing in the community since the inception of the branch opening back in July of 2017 was bringing financial awareness to our community. And the community back then, with regards to income level, was much lower than it is now. And I would like to please continue the financial awareness in the community with our children, with our seniors, and of course, the average age residential residents of the community in the areas, pushing through the areas that I have just asked to go into, which again is North Portland, which is between DeKalb and Atlantic, and again, Bedford and Crown Street.
Yep. And if I may add to that, and good evening, everyone. My name's Dominic. I'm the CRA officer. I was there in 2017. By the way, great meeting tonight. You guys have got a lot of passion for the community, which is great. The good news is our request here is to actually expand our reach so that we can bring resources to a further boundary. We're bringing a free tax day to the local senior center thanks to Tony's efforts. We have about 30 individuals that are going to get their taxes done for free. We partnered up with Grow Brooklyn. So our heart's in the right place. We just want to expand it so that we make sure that we include all the schools within the area.
Okay, so the district you're looking to expand to is, could you give me the exact grid, please?
Chair Flynn, does the applicant have a presentation to share tonight?
I don't know. Do you have a presentation? Because we would like to have something that we can actually see.
I do not.
We can share the map. I guess once we get the map delineated, we can send it through. The presentation was in 2017, there was a whole application that the community board actually completed with us. So there really isn't no presentation for this. It's really expanding the blocks to go further than what we currently are, just include more households.
So let me ask you a question. There's no real timeline on this. There's no. Okay, because it would be easier for us to actually make a recommendation one way or the other if we actually had a presentation.
Okay. So what I can do is that at the next meeting, I can present the map and we can, is the map sufficient or?
How about if you do this? Let's come back next month, okay, with a presentation that we can actually see. That way we can answer questions.
Okay. Now, regarding the presentation, is there anything in particular you're looking for? Or should we just bring back the application from 2017 with the updated map?
Mr. Chiazza, you're welcome to share whatever you like in the space of 10 minutes. And actually, because you've been with us for 3 hours tonight, you've seen 2 really great examples already. So you saw that they had some slides, they shared some basic information. The board members change every 2 years. So they cannot and should not review an application for a vote without some context. It's important.
Okay, so I'll for next month, I'll definitely bring back the application from 2017. And in addition, we'll add the updated map.
Thank you. Because I was here for the previous presentation, the presentation before that, but not all the members were.
Okay.
I'd like to say something.
Mr. Chairman,
I'd like to be recognized. Mr.
Can I be recognized?
Okay, after Denise, Cyril. Okay, go ahead, Denise.
Okay. So I just want to quickly say that I look forward to hearing back from Ridgewood Savings Bank. I can testify to the fact that, as Ms. Marshall indicated, that they have been doing some really great work in the community in terms of the literacy piece, in terms of the senior centers, in terms of speaking to young people And those are our two greatest communities, the seniors and our youth, because we need to certainly develop them to have an understanding about what that is. And that the older adults need to learn and have the opportunity to know what's out there and available for them as well. And I have been at, some of their experience, some of their work. And I just wanted to relay that to the board. I think it's work that is needed. That's my comment.
Thank you, Denise. I
Thank you.
also admit that I like what they're doing also, but we still need a presentation.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to
Okay,
say,
Miss-
I'm so
okay,
sorry.
go
I
on.
just want to say
Mhm.
thank you. And next month when we do come back, I will be better prepared for you because I did not know that I was supposed to present a map, excuse me. Thank you.
Not a problem.
And thank you, Ms. Peterson.
Okay, Cyril?
Mr. Chair, I would, since the vote we just took, I was a little confused about the vote. I don't want to vote no. I'd like to change my vote to abstain, if that's possible.
I don't know if we can do that.
But which vote? Okay.
Okay, Cyril, once the vote has been made, I don't believe you can change your vote after we move on to a new item on the agenda.
Really? Okay, thank
I
you.
don't know. I think you should
Mr.
check that out.
Scow, we'll note it in the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that,
I gotta
okay,
go.
it's currently 9:08. Next on the agenda is the chairperson's report. I have nothing to comment on, being that I've already commented on. I'll be commenting, anything I have to comment, I'll be commenting tomorrow at the full board. Okay, other committee business. Do we have any other committee business?
Yes, I
Okay.
have like 15-minute presentation I'd like to make.
Okay, we'll be over at your house, have cookies and coffee, okay?
No, dinner.
Okay, community forum. Okay, is there anything from the community that I'd like to bring up? Okay, nothing from the community. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Peterson, Ms. Yearwood Young. Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much, committee members. This has been a long meeting. I appreciate the fact that you have stayed as long as you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
This was definitely.